Hello ladies and gentlemen, I hope I'm going live about now. A very good iPhone 16e review day to you. Obviously tomorrow is when you will actually be able to buy an iPhone 16e. So today is when we're getting reviews, so you can actually decide if the iPhone 16e is right for you. And I'll help you do that too by going through some of the bigger reviews, some of the bigger analysis, as we've discussed multiple times on this channel. To me, the most interesting part about the iPhone 16e, beyond some of the questionable choices like the MagSafe removal, the exact camera specification and stuff like that, to me the obvious main point about the iPhone 16e is its Apple design C1 modem, 4nm baseband chip, 7nm transceiver, I believe. Is it actually good enough? Is it actually efficient? How well does it perform in terms of battery life? Both in a more scientific term, once you normalize for battery capacity, but also once you actually consider the fact that the 16e has a surprisingly large battery. So a lot of stuff to look to, and thankfully Geekerwan, I know we've had a rocky relationship with some of their content, but they do have a review of the iPhone 16e that involves a lot of Apple C1 testing. So that's quite cool. That's something I really look forward to. Of course, we're going to look at MKBHD, maybe some Dave 2D as well. I already pre-downloaded everything, but as always, I remain open to any suggestions, any comments. Yeah, and that's about it. Obviously, do all the YouTube jazz before we get fully started. Subscribe to the channel, like the video, share it out with anybody who you think might enjoy it, and of course comment. You guys know I love interacting with a lively comment section. Leave a super chat or super sticker. Shout out already to Max Maximus leaving a very generous €11.99 donation saying, hey man, hit some crazy work stuff recently, hard to watch live. Believe me bro, like I used to watch like 2-3 YouTubers like somewhat regularly live. I mean, not the whole stream, but at least a little bit. I completely fell off in that regard. Yeah, I fully understand. Once work creeps up, like work can be like 10% more, right? But that leaves like 50% less time for your regular life because you have some fixed stuff, right? Like caring for your apartment, for your family, for your friends group, right? So all of these other small things that you kind of cram into one like pool, they just get less and less attention. I still listen to some stuff when I'm at the gym, but it doesn't give quite the same energy. I know some of you watch me while you're at the gym. I really try to keep the energy high so I don't disappoint you during that. But overall, yeah, it's not every podcast, not every live stream is ideal for the gym as well. So that cuts significantly into some live watching as well. But I really appreciate your work. That's Max again. Wish all of you a great time. Thank you so much. How has your iOS, I assume you mean iOS 18.4 experience, been thus far? My iOS 18.4 experience has actually been incredibly positive. The first beta is about as stable as iOS 18.3.1, the official release. No huge bugs, no huge battery drains. Now, of course, running Apple Intelligence features, everything from Image Playground, less so writing tools. I am very multilingual in that regard. Like, and most of the stuff I type is German. So I don't use writing tools that much because it would require me to switch. I prefer my Apple Intelligence and my Siri set to English, but Jesus, just saying her name activated it on my iPad. That actually turned it on. I should turn off it. I'm now stuttering because I don't want to say her name or its name because otherwise it will get triggered again on my iPad. So Apple's voice assistant, I prefer it to be in English, but overall I type a lot in German, so I don't have too much experience with writing tools. However, Genmoji have been a blast. They are by far my most used AI feature from everything that has come out thus far, and I don't mean Apple, I mean across ChatGPT, Google Gemini. I don't use that much more than that. So I've already had it on my Mac. Of course, it's much, much more convenient to use it on the iPhone. So I've been very, very happy with it. Probably should send more of them out on Twitter just so people see. Like, but yeah, my emoji list is just like full of recent shit now of both generalized Genmoji, just like cat sleeping on cute pillow or something like that, and then it actually becomes more about like specific people. Like I've had people send me like their photos more because like my photos library had only like one photo of them, so iOS didn't like save them as like an individual. So what I did is like, yeah, send me 4 or 5 pics, let my phone sleep overnight while charging and Wi-Fi connected, right? And then I could create Genmojis and Image Playground stuff for them. Image Playground is objectively like algorithmically worse than anything else, but it is on device, it is free, it is automatic, it is unlimited as long as basically you have battery life. It doesn't come with some of the bigger repercussions or questions, at least when it comes to protection for content creators and shit like that. So Apple is extremely protective there. Like I've had some stuff declined that I don't think should have been declined, and then anything just connecting to any kind of brand or established franchise in any way. Like I asked it to draw me with like a Star Trek uniform, which I think shouldn't be a problem, to be honest. But because like it's not like, I mean, yeah, they have a patent on Star Trek is by itself, but like I can wear a uniform in real life too, but it didn't do that. So you won't get like the grok results where you can make it like draw Mickey Mouse fighting Santa Claus in like a huge battle or whatever. Plus violence is a no-go at all. So yeah, if you know how to use it, it's really fun. But overall, iOS 18.4 has been great. Obviously, it's not fully featured yet. The voice assistant does not yet have much new functionality, and she does definitely have some new AI issues. Like some stuff that would have previously rightfully triggered a note or a reminder gets some weird results. So I hope that gets fixed, but honestly, this is something that I've seen across the board. Like Google Gemini has also struggled to just match the functionality of the system features from Google Assistant. So yeah. But yeah, thank you, Max, for the very generous donation. Usually I don't cover super chats for that long, but very generous. Thank you so much. Long-term supporter. Shout out to all of you. Again, to beyond super chats, you can also become a supporter right here on YouTube, or shout out to Max again, Steve and Angelica, who are MarkTech Pro Max supporters here on YouTube, or you can become a supporter over on Patreon. But that's about it for all the preliminary stuff. I'll definitely leave timestamps later on, so you know this is some early intro babbling, and those were my early iOS 18.4 impressions. However, we can continue with something else that is much, much more important, I think, to you, to me, to the broader tech community, and that is, let's see how the iPhone 16e actually fares in its first big reviews and testings. There definitely are some contradictory reports. Like I've seen some people praise the camera, I've seen some people say it's middle of the road, I've seen some people say it's very underwhelming versus the regular iPhone 16, which does suggest it definitely is using a smaller sensor than the regular 16. However, how small and how limited is a different discussion. So yeah, whenever you guys learn new stuff, let me know, potentially either in the live chat if you catch me live, or you can follow me on Twitter and let me know there. I'm always eager to learn. I don't have that much time myself to research it, so if you want to, like, send me a link to like, oh, these are the new specs of the iPhone 16e, or these are these kinds of benchmarks that are now being being run, and this is how it performs there. So I really, really would appreciate that. Yeah, so our first review of the day is Geekerwan, which is ironic, by the way. Like YouTube in recent times always translates like English titles for me, like to German, and I'm like, I know English, okay? Like I've set my YouTube channel account and everything to like English. And then now that we actually have a foreign language I don't know, it does not translate it. Even like, by the way, I hate it when YouTube just like overlays shit. Like, for example, if this said like iPhone 16 review, right, and they just blatantly translated it, took away all the original Chinese or whatever, I would be like, oh, that's not good. But like you should leave that title and then basically like in parentheses just write whatever however you translate it, just to make it easier. That's how you do it without pissing people off. But yeah, Geekerwan, obviously one of the more nerdy websites when it comes to reviews. We'll later look into MKBHD's iPhone 16e review. He obviously doesn't go into as hardcore of a number section as they do, and I know some of you are really, really nerdy in that regard, like I am, so let's get started.
iPhone 16E 这个手机也算是 iPhone 16系列的。
Yeah, it's a cheaper iPhone 16. I mean, like we've had like Galaxy S10e in the past. We've had like minis. We've had light devices and lineups. Sure, you can argue do some of them deserve maybe like a completely separate branding? Like, I mean, but Google has like the Pixel A, which technically, well, I mean, there are some similarities, like actually here, like they often use like the same processor. It's just that Apple's processors are way better. And they do still focus on stuff like cameras, so they do definitely share some of the priorities of the overall Pixel brand. But in general, is it more of an SE successor? Is it an entirely separate lineup? Is it part of the 16th generation? Honestly, I don't think it matters. I think these are the things that we in the tech community tend to focus on, especially when we tell regular people, oh, look, this lineup is so confusing, right? But then people are like, oh, but what can I get for $500 to $700? And you're like, oh, you can either get a discounted iPhone 16 or you can get a 16e. And they're like, cool, so it's not confusing. Right? I mean, like, yeah, sure, I have to make some compromises if I want to spend the least amount of money, or I have to wait a little. But like, yeah, that's about how it works. The regular people, I think, are way less confused than some tech YouTubers think.
元，刘海屏，一颗摄像头，机身背面和 iPhone 4一。
I mean, it's the same camera layout, kind of. Obviously, it's not the same camera.
样简洁。哎呀。
Yeah, and I mean, this is something, by the way, like, when it comes to voting with your wallet and putting your money where your mouth is, a lot of people have said, I don't care about camera quality, I don't care all about this fancy new nonsense, give me a simple design with as little of a camera bump as possible, right? By the way, the iPhone 16e is like the perfect candidate with its current specifications for the argument, oh, you should just make the phone a little bit thicker, and then we don't have a camera bump at all, and you can fit in more specs, right? So Apple removed MagSafe. Let's say that the new 3900 milliampere battery is already good enough, right? Like, make the device like 8.2 millimeters thick. That's 0.4 millimeters. That's nothing from 7.8. Make it exactly as thick as the camera bump. And give a MagSafe back, right? I think that actually that would be a killer argument that people could be making. But I also think, by the way, I do believe that like future 17Es, 18Es, however Apple is going to call them, however regularly Apple is going to upgrade them, I do believe that down the road Apple will give this device dual cameras, they will give it bigger camera bumps, they'll eventually give it like the main sensor from like the iPhone 15 and 16. I wouldn't be surprised if that's like the main push of like the 17e. Like the 17e can easily become just like an iPhone 15 right in the skies. It can have the main 48 megapixel camera from there. Apple can advertise a huge camera upgrade, but at that point that camera will be so far behind the new 18 models and stuff like that at that point it just really doesn't matter. And they can just give it a front display with like a dynamic island, slightly slimmer bezels, and a 2000 nits peak brightness or a 1000 nits a regular brightness. And now they have a very, very decent generational upgrade. Give it an A19 chip, maybe give it my assumption is that probably, hopefully, for example, that we'll get an A19 Pro with actually a decent amount of more GPU cores. Like I could see the A19 Pro have like 8 GPU cores, for example. And then the separate die A19 would have 6 GPU cores. And then the binned A19 for the iPhone 16e, for whatever iPad mini they might make out of it and stuff like that, that would have 5 GPU cores, right? And then yeah, I think all of those updates would still nicely fit into a $600 product. Apple could still cheap out on MagSafe. If they really want to, they can still have only one camera, and so not even put in like the 12 megapixel ultra wide, much less the 48 megapixel one. Definitely no promotion, which at that point will be standard across the entire 17 lineup. So the fact that it does have a dynamic island screen doesn't actually give it Apple's latest or greatest screen in any way. If this actually becomes an annual upgrade, there's a lot that Apple will be able to leverage. Unlike with the iPhone SE, right? Like, we can argue about like, oh, the original iPhone SE was great, and then the second generation was okay, but the third generation, it got like 5G, but it really was outdated with its 4.7-inch screen already. But I guess for its first year in 2022, it probably wasn't terrible, especially given the low price. But then by 2023 and especially by 2024, it just became like an insult, especially at MSRP. So if Apple actually commits to upgrade this annually, then you won't be angry with like the iPhone E. You might be like, oh, the 16E wasn't great, but the 17E is much better value, right? Oh, and the 18E is once again a little bit more underwhelming, but you should really get the 19E, right? It will be reviewed more as like not just on its annual cycle, but also on its relationship to the main iPhone family. So I think this device has a very interesting future. I don't think it will flop. I don't think it will be a massive success in the way that some people think Apple wants it to be, because Apple does not want to make it so good that they end up cannibalizing regular iPhone sales, much less iPhone Pro sales. So I don't think this will get a huge price drop. Like, I know some people say, well, the iPhone XR was $750 and then the iPhone 11 was $700. But then that's a design we kind of never saw again, right? Apple never made an iPhone 12 S or whatever, or not 12S, a 12E, I guess, that was like an upgraded iPhone 11. We left that 6.1-inch 800p LCD screen design with thick bezels behind with the iPhone 11. So I don't think we are gonna leave the 16E behind in quite the same way.
虽然它不像 iPhone SE 一样复古啊，但这个造型你也很难联想到2025年吧。和以往的 iPhone SE 搭载的是满血旗舰处理器不同的是呢，这台 iPhone 16E 啊，虽然搭载的是 A18，但是这个 A18又再次阉割了一刀。GPU 从 iPhone 16的5核。
Yeah, I mean it has one fewer GPU core. It probably has worse cooling than the regular 16. Interestingly enough, it does have more battery, so it would have actually been able to power the 5-core GPU for longer. But overall, yeah, it's not... this scaling, to me, makes perfect sense. Now, we can argue about the exact price point that each one needs to target. obviously, we have had that discussion time and time again. I think the regular iPhone 16 as it stands should have been a $700 product, and I think that the iPhone 16 Pro should have had 256 gigabytes of base storage at $1,000. I think that differentiation would have easily justified one less camera, worse cameras, no promotion screens, right? The one GPU core less and stuff like that. To be honest, I also think that the 16 Pro generation should have had 12 gigabytes of RAM just to make it a little bit more future-proof, but that's a slightly different discussion. Those individual spec points, like, if once I start arguing for that, I also argue for Apple completely giving up their margins, which I wouldn't be opposed to, but those margins are more defined by competition than what I can ask for, because to me, there is legitimately no difference. Like, in the long term, if I buy my iPhone Pro Max at the starting price of $1,200 or at $1,300, right? And that's why Apple does it. But yeah, and then you can argue this should have been like a $500 product, or it should have been like $550 but with MagSafe, or it should have been $600 but with a much better camera and MagSafe, and a display with a dynamic island, right? So you can argue about those individual decisions, but when you look at this lineup, the scaling does make a lot of sense. 1 camera, 2 camera, 3 camera. Worst camera, better camera, best camera, notch with somewhat thick bezels, dynamic island with decent bezels, dynamic island with super slim bezels, right? Aluminum with a decent ceramic shield implementation, aluminum with better ceramic shield implementation, titanium with ceramic shield, with the good ceramic shield implementation, right? Like, speakers scale, USB-C speeds get way better here. I've seen some people say this doesn't have what is it called? Oh Jesus, I forget it. Like that, it does have display output, but it doesn't have the actual like specification inside USB-C. So I assume it doesn't do stuff like display stream compression, stuff like that. But I'm not sure. This is not something that I've seen people test out.
缩水到了4核。那这样一来啊，它的 GPU 规格上和 iPhone 16 Pro 旗舰机已经
I mean, yeah, it depends how you look at it. The A18 Pro has 50% more GPU cores. That being said, a lot of mobile performance also is very, especially in higher end titles, is very memory bandwidth dependent. It's not as bad as Wildlife Extreme will make you out to believe, but that difference on a chip that has the exact same amount of memory and the exact same memory bandwidth will not actually result in 50% more performance. We already see that from the 4-core GPU version to the 5-core GPU version, where instead of being 25% faster as you would just nominally expect, it's more like 17%. So this is probably a third faster.
已经差了50%了。好在 Apple Intelligence 的需求放在这儿啊，那这台手机呢，还是给了你8G 的内存容量 ，CPU 呢也确实是满血的。
CPU still full.
手机本
Okay,
身
it's unbent.
真的没有什么太多值得聊的，但它的体内呢却搭载了一套全新的通信模块——苹果 C1，其中就包含了苹果自研的第1颗基带，这才是我们今天想要了解的东西。
True.
我
Nice.
们今天会综合实验室
Good
的数
focus.
据和实际网络下的表现来综合看看 C1。
Once again, as always with Geekerwan, I will have some notes on the way they conduct their testing. But honestly, in this case, I actually have to say I am not too angry as I sometimes get, because I am happy that we have at least someone doing the testing, and some of them actually giving us some power consumption numbers.
到底为新 iPhone 带来了什么？包括信号、网速、功耗、续航，咱们今天都会来好好聊聊啊。不过在正式测试 C1 之前，咱们先来简单看看这台 iPhone 16E 的性能表现吧。先来看看基准测试，在 Geekerbench 6当中。
So still very fast single core performance. So whatever cuts Apple is making does not impact it. Now real world like multi-core result do definitely seem to be slightly lower. Like I've seen benchmarks where I usually see the A18 with like 5 GPU cores or 6 GPU cores. And again, it's not a difference based on the GPU cores, but it's more like binning and power consumption targets. I've seen it more in the 8300 range. I always find it funny to see the 8 Elite at 10K because it's such a ridiculous number that's like never reached in real world performance outside of benchmarks. But yeah, I mean, technically, I mean, Apple could put in 2 more E-cores and get closer to like 10,800 if they really wanted to, but I don't want them to. If Apple ever adds extra E-cores, I hope that happens when they integrate whatever C4 or C5 modem directly on the die, right? In that case, the extra efficiency cores could then actually handle the workload from the modems, including what at that point I will also assume Apple will integrate their own Wi-Fi baseband chips onto whatever, an 822. I hope they rebrand it once they hit the 20s. Yeah, but for now, 4 E-cores on the iPhone is plenty.
峰值性能和搭载满血的 A18的 iPhone 16啊完全相同，但 GPU 性能就是另一回事了。3D Mark WLE 测试当中，这个残血 A18甚至还没打过 iPhone 15 Pro 上的 A17 Pro 啊。3颗 A18系列形成
Real-world gaming results from everything that I've seen just put it in line with the A17 Pro. Like, I mean, it does make sense, right? It has more memory bandwidth. It has, wait, is the A17 Pro the 6-core GPU version or 5? Because I think it's, I've seen some comparison with the 5-core version on the iPad mini. So it should be still slower than the 15 Pro and Pro Max.
成了一个等差数列，在 Still Nomad Lite 测试当中也延续了这样的情况。这颗 GPU 和骁龙8 Elite 以及天玑9400的差距已经
Yeah, again, these results have absolutely nothing to do with real-world tests. I'm so freaking tired of seeing any benchmarks like that. But at least Still Nomad Lite is still better than Wildlife Extreme.
不像同一代处理器了。GPU 规格这么低，那它的能效表现又如何呢？没想到啊，论能效，这颗4核残血 A18 GPU 居然和5核满血版没什么区别啊！3款 A18系列的 GPU 都是同一个水准的。但是和8E还有9400上的
Which is interesting because literally not a single game in real world actually says that. Because the iPhone 16 Pro Max with its 4600 mAh battery just like regularly absolutely spanks any device. And like we've had like everything from Grid Legends to the new Lara Croft game to what was it already, this Delta Force? No, that's still in beta, right? But like obviously Call of Duty Warzone, but that's just ridiculously better optimized on iOS. It's like, I understand you want to use something that is highly repeatable with like an artificial test, but there is a reason why like Gamers Nexus, Hardware Unboxed, all those PC focused channels, they don't test new GPUs based on like, I don't know, 3D, Furmark, whatever. Like you run that shit for like glory as an overclocker, but you don't really run that for efficiency test, for performance test, for power consumption numbers. You run real games, you look at real world performance.
相比依然是差得老远啊。这样看下来，这颗 iPhone 16E 上的 A18 青春版的 CPU 部分和其他 iPhone 16系列 CPU 几乎相同啊，但 GPU 的峰值性能有了显著削弱啊。好在能效上看起来没啥差别，那我们来简单看看它在游戏里表现如何吧。首先，崩坏星穹铁道，目前游戏
Collapse Stardome, okay. This is way too much data for one graph. This is way too much data for one graph.
iPhone 16E 的分辨率呢给的过高了，但即便我们降到低档分辨率700p 出头，16E 呢也只能跑个平均42。
Can only run an average of 42 frames. Okay, let me quickly. So, By the way, these results, by the way, show already that like their statements on efficiency are like pretty bollocks, because you get like almost the same results, like, and that's not even considering some of the fact that games on iPhone often have like higher dynamic resolution. In real world, they often have like higher quality settings and things like that. Just even here, 17. Okay, here we have roughly the same resolutions. Okay, so they matched it about as well as they could have here. I don't know what this is. 1728 by 798. That's 1728 by 798. The iPhone 16e runs at the highest resolution here. So whatever is happening here, this is garbage testing. Jesus Christ, Geekerwan. Like, I've seen some, I did not pre-watch the video. I really wanted to react with you guys live, but I've seen screenshots of their networking testing. Like, I know sometimes you just cannot align that stuff, but like at that point you really should consider why you get like different results. And I mean like yeah, I understand, but like Jesus Christ. You tuned the resolution somehow here, but you mentioned the 16e here's like a higher resolution? Wait, what's going on? I don't get this.
是只能跑38帧不到。
Okay, sorry. Now I need the subtitles again.
怎么比你跑个平均42帧，中档的 800P 更是只能跑38帧不到，怎么比你都比不过标准版 iPhone 16啊！究其原因呢，是 iPhone 10。
Yeah, but the scaling in terms of power consumption, by the way, is very, very nice. It does suggest that there is not much of a huge benefit over the A17 Pro in terms of raw efficiency. Maybe a tiny bit, but overall some good results. And again, like when it comes to like actual real world performance, like I just see like when I look at their efficiency numbers and I see like the Vivo X200 here use like 7 watts, I'm like, yeah, like this clearly is like not the perfect setting here that you chose.
16亿的散
I mean, the iPhone can consume more wattage, so I'm just confused.
热表现非常一般啊！看功耗你会发现，整机只给到了4瓦左右的释放啊，这比标准版的 iPhone 16低出将近1瓦。
That should give it like a monumental battery life, given its 4,000 mAh battery here.
来 iPhone 就已经比较怂了 ，iPhone 16e 只能说比怂。
Yeah, whatever, bro. Whatever helps you sleep at night. Literally, like, you're the only guy continually claiming it. Like, nobody actually testing a broader range of games. Even including some super popular ones in China, like Genshin Impact and whatever. Like, it finds these results the same you do. But okay, like I've given up. I'm not using Geekerwan's data anymore for like GPU tests or anything like that. Yeah, I don't use their CPU results either, even those that show that the iPhone like gives you 3,700 points in Geekbench, making it by far the best single core performer of any smartphone. I just don't care. I will react to them, I'll consider it, but like they do their stuff with this artificially high cooling when it comes to CPU testing, then their real world results will just be so disconnected from everything else. I'll not say that to defend the iPhone. I know some people will think it is, but to me, I'm sorry, I just don't see that.
如果我们看机身温度的话，仅仅4瓦的 iPhone 16e 30分钟表面温度却和5瓦的16标准版差不多。哇，这个散热实在是太复杂。
It's too retro.
另一个游戏的名朝同样如此，只能跑4瓦的 iPhone 16e。
What? You test all games that are running the same freaking engine. It's like I have no words for this, and I'm not even saying like, oh, these games shouldn't be tested. Of course, these games are actual games and they should be considered. But like, like you can see here, by the way, like all of your efficiency stats that you gave prior, right? Like, you really think that they are correct? The stuff that you got from Steel Nomad Lite, you really thought it was the same? Because in terms of performance per watt, the iPhone delivers 53 frames, for 4.6 watts. Right, that's 11.5 frames per watt here for the A18 Pro, right? Now look at the Snapdragon 8 Elite, and that gives you 56 FPS divided by 6.4. And that gives you 8.75 frames per watt, right? Significantly lower energy efficiency. Now the D9400 actually does seem to have somewhat similar efficiency here to the iPhone 52. I'll even put 55.2, right? Divided by 6.1. Yeah, and you get like 9 frames per watt at least. So your efficiency numbers that you were, this is why I have this tug of war with Geekerwan when it comes to their testing, because I'm like, I'm not saying the iPhone has the fastest raw performance. It often does, but it clearly does not against like devices that reliably consume more than 6 watts on average, right? I don't mean absolute peaks, because when it comes to absolute peak discussions, that's another point of contention between me and Geekerwan. But like, come on, like you have the iPhone here being like 20 to even like 30% more efficient per frame, and you're like ignoring this. Like, yeah, there are some resolution differences here, like 1559 is about the same times 718, so you have about the same resolution here. Don't know why you're doing this times 1.2. Don't know what that means. 16 and E and 15 Pro have the lower resolution, so that makes sense. These devices perform lower because they do not, like this, by the way, like, you know that there are other like Snapdragon chips, there are other Dimensity chips. You realize that this is not the real competition. There is an 8 Elite that has at least one CPU core removed. Maybe you should consider that, because that one actually has power consumption numbers in multi-core that are somewhat more comparable. There are like lower number Dimensity chips, like 9300 or whatever. Like, Jesus, you just make it look as if this A18 is just trash coming along, but realistically it actually still has way better efficiency than these chips.
在分辨率更低的情况下，帧数还远远不如标准版16啊。它这个明朝表现也就跟一些8阵3机型差不多。同样是因为抽象的散热能力，明朝的机身温度4瓦的 iPhone 16E 甚至比5瓦的标准版 iPhone 16还要高啊。原神这里呢，我们不光测了标准成绩，也跑了30度5G 的魔鬼测试，更换了5G 基带的 iPhone 16E， 表现是不是会稍微好
？Okay, I'll actually want this is actually data that I want them to deliver, but I never agree with their conclusions. So we do get some scaling that is roughly in line with losing one GPU core. That's interesting. Higher performance than the A17 Pro. That's actually cool. And then like in real world results. Wait, but like, come on, guys. What is your testing doing here? Like, so the 16E and 15 Pro, where's your regular iPhone 16 here, by the way? Not sure. Like, I assume this is like the Xiaomi 15, by the way. Like, your iPhone 16 delivers 53 frames per second, the same as your Dimensity 9400. But your A18 Pro delivers 50? Was it throttled at some point? What's going on here?
好点呢？确实啊，在5G 下 ，iPhone 16E 缩小了和几位大哥的差距，平均47帧呢，还算是
It's still watchable, playable.
差距可并不意味着反超啊。iPhone 16E 的性能依然不敌 iPhone 16和16 Pro。
Okay, that makes no sense, but okay.
只能说比前年的15 Pro 要好一点。
Oh, it's not overtaking, not overtaken by. Okay.
也没有显著更低啊。本来以往的 iPhone SE 都是性能和标准版一样的小钢炮，还以为这。
I mean, that hasn't been the case for multiple years.
iPhone 16E 也能
Okay, this is just complaining for complaining sake.
iPhone 16E 是散热更差，调度更松，哇，这也真是没谁了。那 iPhone 16E 这个性能表现真没啥可聊的了，咱就突出一个乏善可陈啊。 那么咱们还
It stands out that's mediocre. You were comparing it with flagships, brother. What are you talking about? It's not like just because it's called the A18. Like, come on, this is like such bullshit. It's like saying, oh, like the new 8 Elite with like one CPU core less, it's trash. Or it's like, oh, the Dimensity 93, or it would be like the Dimensity 8400 or whatever. Like, oh, that's like mediocre. No, it's like it's not the flagship chip.
还是赶紧进入正题吧。这
Also, by the way, where are power consumption numbers for any of this here?
16亿也能
Suddenly, right? Like, why did we get power consumption numbers, but suddenly, conveniently in this test, where we have like a 10% FPS difference, right? It would be really easy to calculate efficiency. Why are we suddenly losing those numbers? Also, by the way, way higher resolution being run here. Like, and I say that every single time, but this is more than enough to make up the difference. Like, I'll actually open the calculator instead of doing that in Spotlight search, so I can actually save this shit. So that's 1877 times 864. That's 1.621 or 1621. Okay. So in comparison to that, we have 1697 times 782. That's 1.327. So we do this and divide it by this. That's nope. That's the wrong way. Sorry. So this divided by this result. Can I just copy paste this? Oh, Jesus. That's 22% higher resolution, brother, than a DX200 Pro Mini. Like, I know the 8 Elite also has like a high resolution here. This is the kind of resolution difference that I honestly would just ignore between this here, even if the iPhone is objectively higher still. And then like the 16 and 15 Pro just run way higher stuff. So I know you cannot always normalize that stuff. Smartphones are a little weird in that regard. Dart all the way. Oh, brother, I haven't seen you since like the M4 Mac reveals. Asking how am I doing? I'm doing just fine. I don't have as much time to stream as I would like to, but I'm really happy that I could find the time today. This will probably be a relatively long stream, so I hope you enjoy it. And the stream seems to be working fine. That's great. So I'm just having my usual Geekerwan issues here again, right? Like not normalizing for resolution, not considering different resolution when it comes to efficiency, not considering it when it comes to like everything. It's just like, ugh.
Pro 要好一点。
I'm sorry, I need subtitles again.
机身温度呢也没有显著更低啊。本来以往的 iPhone SE 都是性能和标准版一台，苹果都只能大家都知道。但是看作是一台带5G 的小电脑啊。那我们平时聊的呢都是它电脑的部分。苹果的这个部分呢已经实现了自研，而且水平很高。这个大家
Actually, I was having few exams, so was not active much on YouTube. Yeah, I fully understand, brother. I never judge people for like tuning out. Like you can guess from the subscriber count that we used to have much higher peaks here. I used to do a lot more drama stuff. Like when you remember like a year or so ago, or was it already like 1.5 years ago? I covered a lot of like the Gamers Nexus versus Linus Tech Tips stuff. But honestly, it got a bit toxic, and there's nothing quite like that right now that I think would like require that level of vitriol. Like, yeah, there is some drama in the tech space, but it's never quite as bad. And that's kind of when we peaked. and now we are on a relatively regular schedule for like Apple news, just general tech, smartphone stuff, and it's much more subdued. But I understand that it's not as much of appointment viewing, right? It's not a cultural event in the tech landscape. Even the 16E, I would argue, is a way smaller launch, at least for this channel, than the M4 family of Macs, right? I think I've cultivated a fan base, I hate using that term, that primarily cares about things like iPads, high-end processors, Macs, of course, when it comes to high-end processors. So iPhones actually don't give me those kinds of spikes, so I fully understand. If you tuned in during the M4 reveals, I understand why you kind of tuned out after.
长期以来，苹果都只能依靠高通提供的方案。
So, for a long time is relative. Yes, ever since the iPhone 12 and the switch to 5G modems, Apple has relied on Qualcomm. Before that, they relied on a mix of Qualcomm and Intel, and before that, they relied exclusively on Intel modems. Then they bought Intel stuff. They have long-term agreements still with Qualcomm requiring covering everything from patent sharing agreements to just the fact that, oh, Apple commits to actually keep buying your modems for the next few years. This is slowly running out. Apple did prolong it a little bit, but it will run out very soon. So by the iPhone 18 generation, we really are looking at either Apple just prolongs those contracts with Qualcomm, creates new ones or whatever, maybe just separately for a year or two. Otherwise, yeah, iPhone 19 is probably when all iPhones, similar to how USB-C works, must be based on Apple's modems. Now, that's not a regulatory thing. If in the last minute Apple finds out, oh, our modems kind of suck in comparison to Qualcomm, they can still buy the Qualcomm stuff. But I don't think that's the way that it will play out. I know some findings about the C1 that makes me very excited about it.
C1 就标志着苹果正式进军了通信这部分的自研芯片研发。其实关于 C1 啊，苹果官方并没有详细做发布啊，但它也有几个关键点。
Yeah, Apple does not need to release a detailed release about the C1. Don't even know why that's a suggestion.
需要知道的，第一 ，C1 并不是像 A18 那样是指一颗独立的芯片，它是指呢由包括 Modem 基带、RF 射频收发机基带供电频率等等几颗芯片，加上其对应的软件所组成的一整套系统。
Oh, come on. You could have translated some of it better. You clearly said more words than were translated.
C1 主要包括的是包含4G、5G 信号的蜂窝网络部分，而不是 WiFi 蓝牙这部分。
Yeah, that's important. Apple is building their own Wi-Fi modem, and supposedly it's Wi-Fi 7 based, and supposedly it's coming to the entire iPhone 17 family, but it's not yet here on the iPhone 16e. Supposedly, that's kind of also the reason why Apple is just going with Wi-Fi 6 at this point, and I wouldn't be surprised if for the iPhone 17e, if we get one, Apple really advertises, oh, we have the A19 chip, we have the C2, and we have our first gen Wi-Fi chip. Wi-Fi jumps from Wi-Fi 6 all the way up to 7, right? So Apple has advertisement points in the future that just come also from like using somewhat outdated tech right now.
第三，信号不仅仅只和基带有关，天线设计、调教策略。
Yeah, so when it comes to the C1, the actual baseband modem, that one is built on 4 nanometer. As far as I understand, it's TSMC. And the actual transceiver, that's the parts receiving and sending your signals, that is based on 7 nanometer.
甚至影响更大。而 C1 呢，相比较于 iPhone 16使用的这个高通 X71基带，最直观的更新就是基带 SoC 使用了台积电 N4 工艺 ，RF 收发机呢采用了台积电 N6 工艺。那这两点相较于高通 X71的三星工艺来说，有了很大的进化。尤其是 RF 收发机它从高通的三星14L。
Oh, okay. That's I'm not sure if this is 100% correct. But this is a piece of information that I just wasn't able to find. Now, they call it N6. Apple called it 7 nanometer, but 7 nanometer family of nodes includes N6. So that would actually be quite cool. 4 nanometer, yes, the 16 and 16 Pro is actually using a Samsung Note built 4 nanometer. And if you know anything about Samsung versus TSMC, Samsung's 4 nanometer is in many ways worse than TSMC 7 nanometer. So jumping from Samsung 4 nanometer to TSMC 4 nanometer is a monumental jump. It's like 1.5 generations. And 14 nanometer jumping to N6, yeah, that's also huge. Though I'm not sure if this is probably also Samsung built, right? If they're using this color scheme.
工艺进化到了台积电 N6 工艺上。
But that's cool. I actually tried researching it on what node like Apple's current gen receivers, transceivers were built on, and that's the first piece of info I can find. Doesn't mean it's 100% correct, but usually Geekerwan gets those details.
有显著代差的，这就意味着C1可能在能效表现上是比较亮眼的，包括基带芯片本身呢，也需要集成超小核来控制。
Okay.
苹果其实除了 A 系列 CPU 里的
This is also why I'm saying that once you include it on the main die, whether or not that means including an extra ultra E-core, or you can just say, oh, you know what, we're just gonna run one extra E-core at like a quarter of its frequency, that is partially how you can get more efficiency.
跟大核以外，它也自研了一颗不太常见的超小核，
Yeah.
用在苹果芯片的安全模块，包括苹果的 R1里面啊。那这次的 C1也有用到。那知道了这些啊，咱们就可以开始测试了。我本来想先测试 5G 线网下的峰值速率啊，结果我发现啊，现在咱们这个 5G 可是越来越慢了，在我们工作室附近甚至已经找不。
And I think this is partially why Apple felt comfortable in designing their own processor, because they were looking at like the landscape of, for one, they weren't getting the best parts from Qualcomm. I mean, Qualcomm could have built something on TSMC 4 nanometer if they wanted to, right? I mean, they could have charged Apple extraordinary prices and put something on TSMC 3 nanometer. I mean, they do put like their own stuff on TSMC 3 nanometer by including it on the 8 Elite die. But Apple was like, you know what? 300 megabits, 400 megabits per second, 500. Like, nobody cares about millimeter wave. Real world performance really sucks. If we can really get efficiency as the main advantage, using better nodes, designing our own ultra low power cores, and we can do all of that while saving money, who freaking cares about peak download and upload speeds at that point?
不到能跑到1000兆 5G 网速的测速区域了。那这个
Yeah, and like at 400, that's pretty much where my internet here in Berlin, Germany maxes out. So knowing that it can get there also makes me also there's no millimeter wave in Europe, I promise you that. So I have absolutely no qualms in recommending this device without Qualcomm's. See what I did there? I'm so
这
stupid.
个测试呢也就变得意义不大了，所以我们呢就测试了第一个项目功耗。那首先是 5G 模式下的文件传输功耗，我们在实验室里自己搭建了 5G 合金网，
We built a
1
5G
天
core.
线塞走，
10
打满我们网络带宽，
Okay,
进行大部分传
interesting.
输。
Okay, that's not really real world, but I guess that's very laboratory. I mean, good for you guys to have the resources to do this.
那这次模拟了2档发射功率增益，分别是高信号强度和低信号强度，那对应 5G 信号比较好和比较差的情况，并进行主板功耗测量。那最终呢，我们测出了这样的结果。
Okay, so once again, you don't draw so many stuff on one graph. So the 8 Elite surprisingly using more power than the regular iPhone 16, which that's pretty crazy considering this is a 3 nanometer modem, a newer generation modem. It's like 1.5 generations ahead. Like Apple could have used, by the way, the X75, but instead they used like a custom solution like the X71M. While this is just a standard raw X80, but it's not like a 4 nanometer Samsung X80. It's a 3 nanometer built onto the die. So I would assume that some part comes down to just that Apple's ultra low power cores are very, very good. And yeah, then now the iPhone 16e just is like a multi-generational breakthrough almost. Is that though normalized for speeds is my question. Nope.
你不难看出 5G 网络下 iPhone 16E 的 C1 确确实实在功耗上有优势，尤其是在信号强度比较好的时候。
Especially when the signal strength is relatively good. That might actually come down less to the chip and like maybe the iPhone 16e just doesn't have like the biggest antenna or whatever.
它的功耗看起来明显要比高峰基带的 iPhone 16要来得低，信号强度比较低的时候，它的功耗依然可以保持一定的优势。那如果我们换用4G 网络 ，C1 依然可以有功耗优势吗？在4G 下呢，不论是高信号强度还是低信号强度
Okay, that's actually interesting. So we see very similar numbers for the way that Apple tuned both the Qualcomm modem out of the gate, but also the way they designed their own modem. And it seems like Qualcomm's X80, the way it's integrated, really struggles with 4G.
iPhone 16
Like also like this behavior is not just bad because the peaks are high, but this is very unpredictable. I see that sometimes when like a chip cannot actually be downclocked. Instead, like, and I mean like it cannot be dynamically downclocked by like 20 megahertz, 30 megahertz, right? So what instead it will do, it will fluctuate between a way lower frequency, like let's say it can go down by 100 megahertz, right? Let's create a completely theoretical scenario. You have a chip that runs at 1 gigahertz, but you want to run it at 0.95. Now let's say that chip cannot actually run at 0.95 because its integrated controllers and stuff like that don't fluctuate by 50 megahertz. So what instead the chip will do, it will fluctuate between 0.9 gigahertz and 1 gigahertz. And on average, that creates the impression of a 0.95 gigahertz processor. Is that what's happening here? Because it looks really, really unstable on the 8 Elite.
的功耗都要比 iPhone 16来得低啊。主板功耗上的差距呢
By the way, this stuff also makes me very optimistic. Like when people said like, oh, by like the C3, Apple hopes to catch up with Qualcomm. And I was like, yeah, but Qualcomm, like it's not like Qualcomm will be stuck with the X80. They will move on to X85, X90. If like the Snapdragon 8 Elite 3, for example, is built on 2 nanometer, there is a good chance that like it will get a nice boost from putting the modem on that too. But like, if that's what Apple can achieve with theoretically, this is a 4 nanometer versus this being 3 nanometer, and this being integrated on the die, which is largely considered to make it more efficient. Like, it seems like Apple's CPU core design is just so freaking good. And the way they also know how to leverage TSMC's technologies. Like, by the time Apple moves this to 3 nanometer and eventually maybe integrates it into a 2 nanometer A20 chip or something like that, that will be quite insane.
还挺符合官方公布的25%能效增加的，所以综合5G 和4G 下的表现，还是看得出来啊 ，C1 的确是让 iPhone 16E 更节能了。但是除了节能以外，信号表现又如何呢？我们首先测试了在5G 情况下。
That also, by the way, if Apple keeps cooling the exact same on the A19 generation, that bodes really, really well for like outdoor sustained brightness, outdoor battery life, even when you have to boost brightness, because now your modem will not be in the way of like creating too much extra heat, drawing too much extra power. That's really cool, and that could explain why they might try something like the iPhone 17 Air. Maybe they're just so confident in the combination of using both their own Wi-Fi modem and their own 5G modem. They just said, you know what, we have this kind of like prototype super thin device. We made this as like a test to make eventually a foldable. And it's like, oh, it actually performs pretty good in the real world. Let's make this instead of a Plus. We weren't selling them anyway.
瀑布图啊，我们在屏蔽箱内搭建了一个自有的 N41频段的5G 核心网基站，并且布置了2根1x1 SISO 的信号发射天线，以及一根额外的噪声发射天线。然后呢，我们绘制出了这张5G 下的信号瀑布图。简单解释一下这张图啊，横坐标是我们的发射增益，它可以代表信号强度；纵坐标呢是噪声水平，它代表目前的干扰程度。那我们通过 iPerf 拉流下行测速来判断实际的信号质量，最终就得到了这样4张图啊。那图上的等高线呢代表传输速率， 高线越黄，就说明此时的传输。
Yeah, like I'm wondering, is it like are you really implying that the Xiaomi 15 has bad connectivity? Or am I reading the graph wrong? Because the Mate here, it must be the other way around.
输速越快，不难看出啊，在 5G 环境下 ，iPhone 16E 和 iPhone 16是比较接近的。但在干扰水平比较低的时候呢，它比 iPhone 16的调速来的要早。
Yeah.
那这里面最强的无疑是华为 Mate 70 Pro 加，即便
Is that on 4G or 5G though? Like that's interesting. That could also come down to like the very specific band that you're like. What did he say? It's N41. I'm not sure which ones are now. Maybe I should do more research into it these days. But like obviously, like the needs in China might be a little bit
看得
different.
出来啊，C1 我们首先
Like
测试了在
5G is
5G
like very confusing in like which country prioritizes which bands and stuff like that. Obviously, Huawei has that problem of having to design their own modems because they're like prohibited from doing business with certain US companies.
放下的信号瀑布图，2根1x1 SISO 的信号发射天线，以及一根额外的
An
噪
additional
声
noise
发射天线。
transmitting
然后我们
antenna.
绘制出了这张
He mentioned
搭建了一个自有的
a cell phone N41 frequency. Okay, so this is already a little bit not real world, and I'm not saying that to defend the iPhone, because in the real world it will be confronted with a lot of bands simultaneously. So I can actually look that up. I'm not sure if N41 is like what kind of mix of like frequencies it is. N41 band, is it 5G? 2500 megahertz. Okay, so and then 40. You see, like there are like a ton of 5G frequency bands. Like BRS doesn't know its way, so wireless. Okay. S-band. I'm not like this stuff you only know if you're like really deep in the sauce. I'm not even sure, like, does it, like, that's bandwidth and 41. Okay, so N41 seems to have, like, a very, like, broad, really broad capabilities, which is cool. So that's probably why they chose it. But, like, I'm not sure how that compares to, like, what is more common in the West versus what's more common in China. Again, this is not done to discredit any of them. This is just me analyzing this because I'm not an expert on this and I'm not actually giving any big opinions here. But that's interesting to note. So this is why I would love these tests to be run by like companies, and that's why it was actually interesting to get some carrier data when we had all of that controversy about whether or not MagSafe was removed because the C1 couldn't handle its interference, and like there was some carrier data provided through Apple that said, oh, here it is with a case, here it is without a case, like a case that includes MagSafe magnets, and what ultimately happened is that fundamentally there was no difference, but they also gave you like very stable, like 200 megabits per second download results roughly. So I wonder how they tested it, if they tested it somewhat real world or they tested it more in a laboratory like Geekerwan is doing here.
核心网基站，并且布置了2根1x1 SISO 的信号墙，由下行测速来判断实际的信。iPhone 16的调速来的要早。那这里面最强的无疑是华为 Mate 70 Pro 加，即便在最强。
Yeah, but are they really implying here that the Xiaomi 15 has by far the worst performance? Because this is stuff that like legitimately wouldn't really line up too much with my real world findings. I find the 8 Elite to be much more impressive, but that would be crazy.
的干扰下，依然可以维持满速，直到增益下降到60多 dB 啊。那在同样的干扰情况下呢 ，iPhone 16和 16E 跑到70多 dB 的增益就已经开始掉速了。不过有一点需要注意的是，这个测试呢，我们只搭建了纯5G 基站啊，没有加入4G 基站。
Okay, so they tested. Yeah, I mean, of course, it's 5G. We already analyzed which which band it was using.
信号强度呢，在降低到一定程度之后，就不会 fallback 到4G 网络，而是直接断网了。那这个呢，会跟咱们的日常使用场景是有区别的。
Okay, that's correct.
我们还测试了4G 单天线塞锁。
Wait, well, okay, so but bro, you had like 4 pieces of data in it with a lot of data in it, and you praised the Huawei, you made some direct comparison between the iPhones, but why did you not mention how the Xiaomi 15 performed? Because that graph looked abysmal. What is up with Geekerwan and not mentioning when they're like actual findings that are far better than even just looking at power consumption graphs? Which, by the way, that would explain the high power consumption. If the 8 Elite really struggles to reach like that stability to provide you good 5G at a certain level of interference or a low signal strength level, that's like bad. And it should be noted that like whatever Apple is even doing with a custom X71 modem, supposedly, at least according to your findings, is superior than what's happening on the X80 modem on a 3nm die on the Snapdragon 8 Elite chip.
一定程度之后，就不会 fallback 到4G 网络，而是直接断网了。那这个呢，会跟咱们的日常使用场景是有所区别的。我们还测试了4G 单天线塞锁，20兆赫频宽，4种频段下分别的速域啊。在联通和电信主要使用的 FDD-LTE 伴1和
Okay, so the iPhone performs better here. 16E. Okay, so in terms of 4G, the 16E is definitely being left behind, at least on these 2 things. But then when it comes to uploads, it's also inferior here. But then like the B40 here has like almost no upload on the B41. So this is actually where in real world, where you get a lot of these bands working simultaneously, your phone could like access like this thing for upload and this thing for download. So isolating these things does not like give you the best understanding of performance. I mean, like by this logic here, right? This actually wouldn't confuse me too much, right? I mean, it's objectively probably not 3 times slower than the 8 Elite, but maybe on this specific band it is. But like, yeah, then you have like numbers where it's clearly also not 3 times faster. Or is it not upload? What is that speed that you're showing?
和伴的3频段下，那它的下行速率几乎和高通基带的 iPhone 16以及小米15相同，但上行速率明显比较慢。而在移动主要使用的 TDD-LTE B40、B41频段下，那它的下行速率反而比较慢，但是上行速率又比其他两台手机。
Okay, so this is stuff where I honestly like the problem is you're isolating bands and like I hope that they have like these other tests are real world, because this is interesting on like in a scientific perspective, and I'm sure stuff will get better. Some will get better. I'm sure some LTE stuff will actually get worse down the line as they deprioritize its support. But yeah, it's interesting the way they're showing it.
C1 擅长的频段和高通基带还挺不一样的。
Yeah, okay, that's not a bad statement. Probably a little bit more Western market optimized.
我们这次为了测试它的实际信号表现，专门
Okay, some real world
我
stuff.
们就来实际看看，在高铁这种要应付多基站快速切换的场景下 ，iPhone 16E 的表现如何？那5台手机呢，均使用中国电信的 SIM。
Okay, this is actually, I didn't know this was tested on like I already had some issue with this testing, like just in general, but like testing this on a high-speed train, the issue is all of these devices now compete for shit, right? Now they already compete with other stuff. It's incredibly unstable. Like you can have, like usually what I would say, my iPad, even my M1 iPad, because of its larger antenna, generally performs way better in scenarios like this than my iPhone with a newer modem but just like a smaller antenna. But especially once you get into like a train, you get so much instability in that regard. You would need to run these tests literally dozens of times per device before you have like representative data points.
第一个测试啊，我们开了一个
And you would have to test them like you know, like you put them in airplane mode in between. You run the same piece of the train path again. So that would be scientific. Now again, I know they still are limited in some ways, but these kinds of results can give you very, very misleading stuff.
对流让5台手机同时在火车上观看这个直播间，我们记录10分钟内直播的掉线次数以及缓冲的总时长。那这样呢，我们就可以看得出，在高铁这种基站切换频繁的场景下，这几部手机的掉线情况。那结果在5G 情况下，不论是这里面哪一台手机，都出现了频繁的掉线情况。
There were frequent drop calls on all of them. I assume this is the number of drops. I have no idea what this means.
其中掉线次数最多的是 iPhone 16 iPhone 16的掉线情况也比较严重。那 iPhone 16 Pro 和小米15比较接近，掉线次数最少的呢是采用。
But again, like these are used the same modem, and we are looking at like 10% off. So this versus this is like really margin of error in a scenario like this. The Vivo here does show the best results. So, and especially if this is like peak speed, I think that would actually be representative of it being better. But then once again, for my primarily Western audience, this is a China test. This is a test in China, so it might not fully reflect how it is for you using a 16E in the West.
X200 Pro Mini。那不过考虑到高铁上这5台手机的距离本身就比较近，而且5G 下手机之间的信号干扰和屏蔽也可能会导致测试的误差。
True.
这个测试
That's all
更
correct.
多还是仅供参考。但即便如此，也不难看出iPhone 在这种场景下的确会比安卓更容易断线。我们把网络切换到了4G。
What's the lower number, bro? What's the lower number?
10分钟的测试当中 ，iPhone 16 Pro 变成了掉线最多的那一台。iPhone 16和
Okay, yeah, so this data is just worthless. This data is all about like, oh, you had like, smartphones can be stubborn sometimes. You connect to a network, you refuse to like switch bands and whatever. It's yeah. Like I mean, it makes no sense. Just like realistically, like unless you suggest that titanium is the difference here. That the iPhone 16 Pro is disconnecting so much more often.
掉线次数持平，但是 iPhone 16E 的掉线总时长更短，仅次于 vivo 的 X200 Pro Mini。
Wait, what is that?
但是 iPhone
But you have a total disconnection time of the okay, so this is disconnection time in like minutes probably.
掉线总时长更短，仅次于。
But again, these results are all in the margin of error here.
的 X200 Pro Mini。考虑到 iPhone 16E 测试时放置的位置本身也比较吃亏，那可以说它在4G 网络情况下的相对表现是强于高通基带的 iPhone 的。那么在
That's a wild statement, but okay.
高铁上让这台机器强
even with like a pro Apple bias, I wouldn't have said that this feels like the Qualcomm was worse. So I'm often really confused by the summary statements by Geekerwan here.
我们也测试了一下在行驶过程中同时测速的情况，结果5G 下令人意外的情况。
Okay, 16E, 18, 90. So peak speeds are very nice here, relatively low here, and then kind of terrible over here, relatively. So I really couldn't tell you what this means. I mean, does this suggest that the C1 is already better than the X71? I don't know. In real world, I have seen tests where just like Snapdragon 8 Gen 3 and to a lesser degree 8 Elite devices just end up performing roughly the same as the iPhone. So because like Samsung's Note, for example, might be worse, but the core technology is the same. So it would come down to like antennas. And I mean, yes, you're holding it wrong could be an argument, but like you did conveniently, by the way, leave only the Android phones open on the one side. Again, it's not a conspiracy theory, but I am saying that this kind of methodology is legit bad.
出现了3次测试 ，iPhone 16E 的下行带宽均仅次于小米15，比2台高通基带的 iPhone 明显要快。上行速率呢也同样比2台高通基带的 iPhone 要快啊。或许新 iPhone 的
when they were previously comparing it to Qualcomm, they were comparing it to Qualcomm on the iPhone.
能力的确是有所进步的。 那4G 下它的下行带宽就没那么快了，但是上行带宽确实是相对比较快的一台。总的来说呢
That actually wouldn't surprise me too much. Though again, you see the instability in their data testing, and this is kind of why these results are completely meaningless down the line. Like you have like what I assume faster upload than download. I'm not even sure with the way that, like this would make sense as data for this, but not so much for this. But then you have like the iPhone 16 Pro underperformed the regular 16. So there's clearly some competition going on here between the devices. One is more covered up than the other. One just had more luck in the testing. This stuff would need to be like run on repeat, on repeat, on repeat. You would probably want like dozens of devices. It's yeah, this is, and I'm not saying that they should have been able to do this, but I'm just trying to say, even if the iPhone had like clearly won here, like let's say every result was this from the iPhone 16 Pro, right? 42 megs here, fast, by far fastest download, relatively fast upload. If all tests were like this, I would be like, really? The iPhone 3 times faster, 2.5 times faster than the 8 Elite? Nah.
实际场景的测试表现来看，它至少没有比高通期待的 iPhone 表现更差。那这次我们首发测试的时间比较有限，因为信号测试本身就是一件难度非常高的。
Yeah, I'll admit that. I'm not criticizing them for having any kinds of mistake, but sometimes this is honestly where less is more. You did a lot of very different testing. You did your laboratory testing. You did your real world testing. You kind of maybe should have focused on one, or at least like separated this stuff into different videos, because neither one it was perfect.
所以目前的测试结果是比较粗略的。但从我们目前的测试来看
Okay, those are good acknowledgments. I can work with
确
that.
实比之前的 iPhone 的
Okay, more power saving, good.
至于信号呢，其实基带只是其中的一环啊。天线设计的影响呢是更重要的。那我们也没觉得 C1 能够彻底改善 iPhone 的信号。那反正单论能效呢，也许你可以期待一下，今年换用了自研基带的 iPhone 17系列了。
That's not happening across the board. The only iPhone getting the C1 this year, or who knows, the C1 Pro, or who knows, maybe already a C2, but most likely just a C1 is the iPhone 17 Air.
过程当中，我还意外发现了一件事儿，那就是 iPhone 在长时间断网之后，重新连接基站的策略非常的不积极啊。
Yeah, this is honestly, this is real world adjustment. Like, how long do you let your phone, like, it's not buffer, but like search for a new connection once it's disconnected? You would do that because you know, oh, if I lost connection right now, the chance that whoever person is probably moving here has moved far enough for the connection strength to meaningfully change is actually very low. So let me wait a second or so longer instead of trying the same process 3-4 times in the meantime, getting hot, consuming more power. So let me take like a 3-4-5 second break and then we'll work.
这样。
你看啊，现在我手机是在飞行模式，然后这是我们的一个自主的4G 网络，然后呢，在这个屏蔽箱外面呢，基本上是没有信号的，信号。
But like, yeah, but that's like it's also its preference for the 4G specifically in your studio. Like, did you have like access to the modem to make sure it's even well optimized for it?
会有信号。然后我现在把我的飞行模式给关掉，让它去搜索信号。你看，开始搜索了，1次、2次、3次，好，还是正在搜索，没有搜索到信号。然后这个时候呢，它会进入到一个相对来说比待机功耗稍高，但是就是慢慢的在搜索信号的一个状态。然后我们再等一会儿啊。
I mean, I literally never have this long of a connection issue. Like 5G turning off, yeah, turning on, yeah, 3, 4, 5 seconds. But like never this long. This is, sorry, bro, this is like your lab.
好，掉下去。好，现在出现无服务了。你看这个地方的这个功耗也开始。
Yeah, bro, you have like an artificial network there. Like, you should know that this is not like representative.
现在已经是一个有信号的状态了，但我手机上依然显示无服务，而且呢，它好像并没有再搜索的意思。我们再等它一会儿。
Yeah, because your signal is ass.
你看它其实没有任何搜索的情况啊，它没有任何搜出来的状况。然后这个时候呢， 广大 iPhone 用户最熟悉的场景出现了。如果我这个时候打开一下飞行模式，再把它关掉，注意看啊，3、2、1，好了，网络回来了。
Okay.
不是，这太抽象了吧？这是谁写出来的方式啊？这就是为什么 iPhone 在不同基站切换的时候，你会看到它的网络经常回不来，经常会断网的根本原因。好，这一台是 iPhone 16E 啊，我们再来。
Okay, so in the completely artificial testing of having connection to one set box for 4G and then another, the iPhone will not like to switch between them. Okay, I noted that.
恢复的情况是什么样子的？那现在你看到啊，我现在是飞行模式，然后我现在把它。
So is the 16E noticeably better in that regard?
我觉得时间差不多了，咱们现在把这个屏蔽箱给它打开。你看，它跟其他的 iPhone 一样，同样也是不去搜。
Oh, okay. So I get it. So better signal comes along, the iPhone does not immediately connect to it. Okay, yeah, it probably is running on like some timer before it does the search again, so it just doesn't run down its battery. I mean, if you had literally zero connection, then the chance of 5G or 4G actually suddenly turning on, because that's not a real world scenario, right? If you have 0 4G or 0 5G, you're not in like a Faraday cage usually, or your connection is not in the Faraday cage. So yeah, I mean, I guess it could be faster, but it's not something that I've ever experienced as a problem in real world. And if it ever happens, I would argue it's sometimes better, you move a little bit and then you do it manually.
都没有啊，这时候我们再开关飞行模式，打开，关掉。
Yeah, now it will connect. Okay.
2、1，瞬间就有网。看来 iPhone 的这个问题不仅仅是基带，不仅仅是天线这些。
No, what are you talking about? That's a power save. That's a software test. That's not a test of the antenna.
我们来试一下小米啊，这个地方也是没有信号的。飞行模式一开启，我们等个5秒钟。
Yeah, it will probably search a lot more. Yeah.
也等个将近1分钟左右啊。那等一下我们打开屏蔽箱，看看它多快能够恢复网络。好，我现在要把屏蔽箱打开，看一下多长时间啊。
Okay, 5 seconds.
恢复了。你看小米的策略，你是不用去。
So it probably has like a 3-4 second timer or something like
这个
that.
情况就是为什么我们明显能感觉到，比如尤其是坐地铁的时候，在几个基
What?
站之间。
No, that has nothing to do with signal strength. Come on, bro. That's such an artificial. Yeah, like once again, their statements just completely don't line up with the actual testing before it. Like you cannot make the statement that the signal strength of the iPhone is worse here. The iPhone's power saving strategy in that regard, yeah, you can criticize it a bit, but like you should know that like you're not actually speaking for a real world scenario. Like yeah, maybe in a super high speed train, if you lose connection, then it takes the iPhone a while. But usually you will never be like that disconnected. Like this was literally zero connectivity.
我给你们再看看更有意思的事情啊！我们现在把屏蔽箱再关上，然后我们再回到那个没有信号的地方。好，现在又没有信号了，对不对？但你注意看啊，它现在这个4G 显示的是多少呢？它有4格。然后我们来测一下速，看到了吗？实际上是没有网络的，0格，看到了没？实际上是，但它的显示依然显示的是4格。
Okay, so that's misleading.
我来刷新一下看看啊。你看现在这个网页都刷不出来，然后你只会看到它这个信号在4、3、2、1这样一格一格往下掉，终于它没有了。那我再离它近一点。
Okay, it was misleading for quite a while.
我们先放到这里，开一点，让它再搜。好，搜到了。
Okay.
你再测一次速，你看这时候它是有速度的，对不对？好，我们关掉屏蔽箱，好，往旁边移一点。你注意看啊，这个速度。
Yeah,
现在已经没有网了，实际上。
Yeah, that's the app being stuck.
速度已经没了，但它还是显示满格信号。
So that's bad, right?
没错，满格信号，但是没网。
看来这就是
Wait, why didn't you show that behavior on iPhone? Is the iPhone less misleading in showing that? Like, were you criticizing one thing for the iPhone, but then criticizing the other for the Xiaomi? Because you did counter show what the iPhone does versus what Xiaomi does, and yeah, you could argue the way that Xiaomi more actively refreshes, like its search is good. But like, why didn't you show that same behavior on the iPhone? Is the iPhone similarly misleading? Does it not more quickly drop bars to show you that connection is actually weak?
为什么 iPhone 用户需要熟练掌握飞行模式的开启与关闭？
I mean, is it? I mean, like, this is such bullshit because this is not a real world test.
像基本技能的
I use like high speed German trains and I never need to turn off Wi-Fi airplane mode on and off for that.
那既然期待的能效更好了，这次的 iPhone 16E 续航会不会有惊喜呢？从 log 文件看啊，这次的 iPhone 16E
Okay, yeah, so this is one spec point that's very interesting. The iPhone 16e has a higher battery capacity than any previous 6.1-inch iPhone.
容量为3961毫安时，那这个容量明显比 iPhone 16和16 Pro 更大。看来这可能就是取消 MagSafe 的核心原因了。那我们这次的续航测试使用了全新的测试标准，因为固定测试流程的续航测试啊，太容易被厂商钻空子了，所以我们这次呢设计制造了全新的5G 续航测试机器人3.0。啊，但目前的测试项目和测试流程呢，我们先不公开。那由于新版的5G 测试还是
Yeah, I'm sure, bro. I'm sure Apple optimizes their battery life specifically for your previous test.
大版还在 debug。
But I mean, like Xiaomi might.
加上这次测试时间非常紧啊，所以我们呢目前只测试了 iPhone 和小米15的续航，
Okay.
并且成绩呢也只是 beta 版成绩。那正式版的续航模型呢，
Sure, bro. Sure. Give us results you're yourself not confident
还要
in.
进一步对项目的反作弊进行调整啊。那这次呢，我们就先简单对比一下，更详细的续航测试还是等咱们接下来的零售机续航大横屏再来揭晓吧。那么在3.0 beta 新版本5G 续航测试当中，
Okay, 16 Pro Max, Xiaomi here being better than the iPhone Pros. Whatever. Like, wait, no, that's 6.36 inches. Okay, that's. Oh, that's. Wait, what? That's the small Xiaomi, but with a large battery. Okay, so it's not the device that I even see tested a lot. I mostly see the Pro, but okay. So then let's just focus on the iPhone. So whatever they're doing with the 15 Pro, that's like, okay, that's really not something I see ever from people who I know own an iPhone 15 Pro. Versus the regular 16, like 10% more battery capacity, slightly more efficient components. That's a big gap, though. That's a big freaking gap. I'm not sure about this one, bro.
中 iPhone 16E 的续航直接
16 Plus, 16 Pro. Yeah, the scaling here makes sense. This one less so. Who know? I don't know. Maybe they used one with a degraded battery capacity at this point. Yeah, and then for the Xiaomi, I just don't know enough. I'm not putting it either above or below.
比两台小尺寸高通基带的 iPhone 16系列强了1个小时左右啊。那如果你要和 iPhone 15
But this is on 5G. So maybe the 15 Pro's 5G just ends up being relatively bad in their testing. I don't know.
Pro 比的话，甚至取得了2.5小时的优势，8个小时左右的续航成绩已经非常接近 iPhone 16 Plus 和 Pro Max 两款大机型了。能有这样的续航表现啊，大电池和 C1 基带的能效表现都功不可没。那不过即便如此呢，它的电池容量也和目前的安卓旗舰相差不小，所以呢，在和安卓阵营对比的时候 ，iPhone 16E 的续航也很难说有什么优势。那更准确的测试结果，就等到咱们的旗舰机横屏续航篇再和大家见面了。
Okay.
那这台 iPhone 16E 呢，就手机本体而言啊，可以说是十分的排量。
Okay, I don't care about their summaries. I never agree with their summaries. I don't want to get angry. Thank you, Geekerwan, for some data. I don't think I loved all the testing, but so the things I took away from it's not bad when it comes to connectivity, but probably not the best right now. Even though, by the way, the only chart we have shows it being better than the 8 Elite on the Xiaomi 15, so take it as you want. Right, by the way, wasn't it impressive how quickly I found this spot? It also has objectively lower power consumption, at least in this specific test. Show me. So that's across 5G and 4G. We saw very similar results on those. So yeah. Yeah, nothing bad, nothing groundbreaking. In real world, they are criticizing Apple's disconnection strategy and how long it stays disconnected. Though if this is disconnection length, then I'm not sure what this is, because that would paint the Vivo in a very negative light. However, these real world tests are somewhat problematic to say the least. Then we had also bad behavior as outlined by them on the iPhone, but then they also outlined something bad that the Xiaomi did, but did not say how the iPhone handles representing its signal strength, whether it's similarly misleading. So my takeaway is that Geekerwan and I will probably not ever fully wipe our asses, vibe well. When it comes to the actual A18 testing, I am still shocked at their efficiency findings based on Steel Nomad Lite, because their own tests when it comes to real world games, let me find some of them here, do not conform with that huge efficiency comparison losses versus the Dimensity 9400 or the 8 Elite, but they keep saying that it's less efficient even though all their games don't find that. So yeah, I as always am somewhat torn. I'm glad they are providing more data than a lot of others, but man, I wish that data was a bit better and the summaries were a lot better, because you have data that actively contradicts your summaries. You need to account for that better. Otherwise, I'll just keep shitting on this stuff. But that's the super nerdy review. It's interesting. I did promise timestamps, but I guess 1 hour and 20 minutes of this stream will just be reacting to Geekerwan. However, there is also one much more mass market friendly review by MKBHD. When it comes to just the battery life, I wanted to show the numbers by Dave2D. So he tested all iPhones here, found that the 16E has by far the best battery life of any 6.1-inch iPhone, even beats the 15 Pro Max, and comes somewhat close to the 16 Pro Max. So, and these numbers to me make a lot more sense in the way they scale than what was shown by Geekerwan. So take it as you want. So while I'm not always 100% happy with Dave2D, I have never been led too far astray by his battery life numbers. Sometimes I wonder if he normalizes for brightness, but just a part in me hopes that he definitely does. But speaking of definitely the most mass market friendly YouTuber, let's look at what MKBHD had to say about the iPhone 16e review, which he called "Who Are You?"
Hi, welcome to Honesty Wireless, the world's most honest salesman.
That's a funny mustache.
Hi.
I have not watched this review whatsoever. I have not seen any screenshots from it, any conclusions.
Cheap new iPhone, please. Cool. So, unfortunately, the iPhone SEs are out of style, but we do have iPhone 14s. I think that'll be perfect for you. I'll get you started with that. Actually, I'd like a cheap, small-ish iPhone with a 48 megapixel camera, specifically.
So that's iPhone 15. Okay.
Well then, I can get you the iPhone 15 to get started. Perfect. Wait. Okay, so I would like a cheap, smallish iPhone with a 48 megapixel camera, and I gotta have Apple Intelligence. So, okay. Nobody ever asked for that, but then I'll get you with an iPhone 15 Pro. We got those on refurb. Okay, so I have exactly $600 to spend on a cheap, smallish iPhone I need a 48 megapixel camera. I need Apple Intelligence. I need an OLED screen. I heard that was good. And it's got to have Face ID. And I want that action button. So yeah. Okay.
Which, by the way, the 15 Pro refurbished does cost that much. Maybe not at an Apple store, but if you go to a third-party retailer and you get the base level iPhone 15 Pro refurbished, you'll get it for $600 to $650.
No, yeah, that's still, an iPhone 15 Pro should actually be good for all of your needs. So, and also I hate high refresh rate, so it's got to be 60 hertz. And MagSafe, I hate that too. Don't want that.
Okay, so okay, I get his comparison. It's a funny skit. The reason why it's worse than the refurbished 15 Pro. Well, why is it worse than the refurbished 15 Pro? For one, it's worse than the refurbished 15 Pro, and I'm saying this way because obviously the iPhone 16e, if you buy it at $600, it's not refurbished like an iPhone 15 Pro refurbished. Now, at the discount, maybe you can get the 15 Pro to around $700. Which for $100 you get some niceties definitely, but you get worse battery life in the real world. But you get a tri-camera setup, and each camera will be nice. Yeah, so it will be battery life versus cameras, plus MagSafe and all that stuff. Ooh, interesting.
What? Who are you?
Okay. The other point is that obviously iPhone 15 Pros will not forever be out there to be bought, to be refurbished. I know Apple obviously sold a lot of iPhone 15 Pros, and some people will say, why shouldn't I not get that? Well, the point is that the market of people who actually actively buy refurbished is still much smaller than the market of people who buy just regular devices discounted, right? Like, oh, sure, it's not MSRP, but like 10% less from a 16e puts it around $540, $550. You wait a little bit, or you just get a nice carrier discount on it, because obviously Apple wants to sell as many of them early on as possible. And yes, you would have gotten a better deal if you bought refurbished, but for one, there will not be enough refurbished in comparison to the over 10 million sales that Apple is targeting for the 16e. And also, more importantly, a lot of people just don't want to buy refurbished.
The secret
okay,
to
I have
making
no idea why I clicked the two.
So the phone, good for all of your needs.
Okay. I wanted to make my screen
This
brighter.
is the brand new 2025 iPhone 16e. And this is not a budget phone anymore. So the SEs of the past used to be definitively budget. This one is not. This phone
It's not budget. It's a mid-range. It's a lower mid-range product by Apple. I mean, the iPhone 16 is not mid-range by its $800 pricing, but that's how we treat it.
At $599, and Apple storage upgrade.
Yeah, but the iPhone SE was $479 at 128 gigabytes. So you're paying $120 more for a device with a 3 generations newer chip, double the memory, a C1 modem that will objectively perform way better in real world, a 48 megapixel camera, a larger, like way better battery life, like over double the battery life over that iPhone SE, a 6.1 inch OLED screen, full screen, yeah, sure, notch, but that's not bad in comparison to the iPhone SE. So again, this is one of those classic examples where Apple prices something at launch about 10 to 15% higher than it should be. 15% would actually put it relatively close to like $500, maybe let's say $530, right? Let's say it was $100 more expensive than the $430 iPhone SE. Relay, joining in the chat. Haven't seen you in a while. Welcome. I think that would have resulted in a way different reception. But then again, this iPhone will hit $550, $530. That it will do that through indirectly through carrier deals. It will do so directly down the line. This is not a device that's designed to be bought by tech enthusiasts in the first couple of weeks. In the same that even like a regular iPhone 16 is not even designed to do that. It's probably only just the pros that get that treatment. But even a regular iPhone 16 still is supposed to be like sold, let's say it launches in September, right? Somewhere around the holiday season, okay? So 2 months later, something like that, or 2.5 to 3 months. The iPhone SE was sold for 3 years. Now, even if this device gets like annual upgrades, don't forget, down the line in a year, if an iPhone 17e launches, or when an iPhone 17e launches, you'll be able to get a discounted iPhone 16e for like $500, maybe like $480, and you'll be able to get it refurbished for probably like $450. Now some might say, well, that's in a year. The tech landscape will look very different in a year. Yes, but you will still have a budget iPhone. And that's exactly what the iPhone SE by this point was. It wasn't sold at MSRP either at this point, so it was more like a $350 device. But this is exactly what Apple targets with those cheaper products.
Prices are still ridiculous as usual. So the phone that I happen to be
Also, again, by the way, like the storage stuff, you should only get this device with 128. Once you consider 256, you should get like really a refurbished 15 Pro or something like that. Again, though, battery life will be better on this product. So yeah, but the 512 gigabyte version is just a joke.
holding and testing right now costs $900. So this is not a budget phone. It happens to be the cheapest new iPhone available, but it's not cheap anymore, which makes it much harder to recommend.
I
See,
agree.
the iPhone SE for the past 2 generations.
Well, but the problem is much harder versus what? Because I would argue the iPhone SE from 2022 had no justification to be anywhere near its MSRP by like mid-2023, much less at some point in 2024. So what are you really comparing it against? Are you comparing it versus the iPhone SE 5G back in 2022?
Even though it's been old body, new chip, it's been the easiest iPhone to recommend.
Okay, so this is garbage because I never recommend the iPhone SE. I always recommend people buy, like the iPhone SE I recommend to people who need like a work phone, right? And they'll always keep it fully charged. They don't use it for anything else. Their work requires some iPhone stuff. I'm like, yeah, like if your work already pays for it and you have like a choice, like iPhone SE or iPhone 15, but like you have to pay $200 more. If you already have a nice phone by yourself, whether you prefer Android or you have like an iPhone Pro model, get the SE, right? That's what my no, that's not what it's called. Is my sister/cousin's husband my brother-in-law or my cousin-in-law, I guess. But like my cousin and I are basically like siblings. I think he would be my brother-in-law in that regard. So he has like an iPhone SE from work, and that's just what he uses it for. And he himself has like a Galaxy S24 Ultra. And like, why would a person like him spend a dime more on his work phone if the work gives him an iPhone SE for free or like an iPhone 15 for an upcharge? That's just ridiculous.
For most people, to your parents, to kids, to brand new people getting their
No,
first-
it had terrible battery life. I wouldn't want a kid using the iPhone SE in 2025 and then like potentially running out of battery so I can never call the kid and something like that. No, those are terrible recommendations. You should get really them like a Galaxy A50 or something like that at that point. At least you get decent battery life, which is crucial for like an elderly people. Like you want to give them a big screen relatively so they can actually see what they're typing with. So they can have a nice accessibility setting to make text larger and icons larger.
iPhone. To anyone who is randomly upgrading from an old phone.
No!
This is the cheapest new iPhone.
No, those were garbage recommendation, Marquez. You should have always been recommending either refurbished or discounted other iPhones. Like I would argue that even the iPhone 11 was at some points better than the iPhone SE, even if it lacked 5G versus the iPhone SE. But like you should have been recommending people just get Android in that price range. That's what I have done.
And it's fine. But those phones were $399 and $429.
Yeah, but they were also $399 in 2016. So, oh my God, was it early 2017 when the first iPhone SE launched, or was it early 2016? It launched half a year after the iPhone 6S. So, iPhone SE first gen wiki. That's the one with the A9 chip, the 12 megapixel camera. So that one launched in March of 2016. So if we open up the inflation calculator, right? So CPI inflation calculator, that's not even accounting for any tariffs or whatever, right? I know tech gets cheaper, but don't forget the original iPhone SE was also using cheaper tech relatively. So we are looking at the $400 in March of 2016 versus January of 2025. Can I actually do more? Can I do February? No February data. Let's look at January. That's $533, just like with everything else considered. So this again puts me at the argument that this should have been a $550 iPhone, but as I said, 10 to 15% higher, just so people, just so they can collect higher margins up front. Other people wait for discounts. Plus the fact that down the road, the iPhone 17e might be more ambitious, might be more cannibalizing, and they won't be keeping this for 3 years in the lineup. So they will not be benefiting as much from components getting cheaper and cheaper with every year, plus tariffs. That's pretty much all the explanation you need to explain the $600 MSRP.
So at $599, this phone that they've made, we just look at it differently now.
Yeah.
And so I've been using this phone for the past week, trying to figure out who I think I could actually recommend to buy it. And I don't think there is one.
Okay, so I have to say, you have to be brain dead at that point to be recommending DSE to somebody because it's cheap, but not the 16e. Like at that point, you should be saying, "Oh, I wouldn't recommend either DSE or the 16e." I would have a far easier time recommending like my grandma to get the 16e. Yes, it is relatively expensive, but for example, she doesn't definitely not give a crap about promotion. She does not recognize the difference in camera quality between like this sensor and the larger sensor on the 16 and 16 Plus. And she, for her, battery life would be the absolute priority because even if she doesn't go out too much, that way she can forget to charge her phone a little bit more often, and I still would know like that I can always connect to her, can localize her, help her if anything is needed.
The secret to
That's a
making
sick
the
animation.
SE iPhone so cheap for years has been the parts bin strategy. Basically taking parts that they've already spent the money engineering and just Frankensteining them together. And this is true, again, for the 16e. So this time, it's mostly in the body of the iPhone 14. So you've got your aluminum build, your flat sides, your USB Type-C, even IP68 water resistance. But then it's a new single camera ring on the back. We'll get to that in a minute.
Okay.
And they've added the action button to the left side, too. Up at the front, it also still appears to be straight from the iPhone 14.
So it's a mix a little bit of iPhone 14 plus iPhone 15. Or even then, like the action button only came with the iPhone 16, so that's an interesting choice. But it's not a component that's really expensive or complicated to integrate.
6.1-inch screen with a notch and Face ID. It definitely is just all bringing the cheapest iPhone up to date with a more modern look.
Yep.
Again, remember the last one looked like this.
Yeah, so this is why I don't understand how you could have... Like, I understand recommending it in 2022, and obviously I understand recommending the original iPhone SE. The second gen is kind of in betweenish, but like the first gen iPhone SE was actually pretty good. Now, at that point, $400 was actually way, way closer to the flagships that were more like $600-700 with the iPhone 6s and 6s Plus. Now the flagships are $1,000, and some people still are asking for promotion on the iPhone 16e, even though they didn't give promotion to the regular 16 yet. So I don't get that argument whatsoever. And people who are saying that clearly are not the huge market of people actually buying the iPhone 16 and even 16 Plus, because those people clearly don't care about promotion.
This is way better. It's not the brightest display in the world,
No.
so once you get it out into direct sunlight, it's a bit less visible than
I also don't think it has like the best anti-reflective
some
coating,
other actually modern displays.
because that's also an easy way to save like a few cents here and there.
So still 60 hertz, which is still silly.
Nope, it's not. It's really not at that price point. I know some
general-
people will say, well, other Android devices have it at that price point. Like, yeah, but do they have the A18 chip at that price point? Do they get you all the benefits of the Apple ecosystem at that price point? Like, come on.
It looks fine. But
Yeah,
this is exactly
that's-
where the
that's
iPhone
fine
11
of a
begins.
statement.
So you've got this whole family of iPhone 16s now, 16e, 16s, and 16 Pros. Good, better, best, if you want to call it that.
Yeah.
And so the cheapest...
And by the way, the difference between the iPhone 16 at MSRP versus the iPhone 16e in terms of price is percentage-wise actually significantly bigger than the difference between the 16 Pro and the regular 17. Jan, you were saying, there are some reviews online, which is hilarious because they went up at 3 a.m. German time, and I woke up at 4 a.m. and just randomly reached to my phone, which I usually never do at night. And I was like, and I opened up Twitter and I'm like, iPhone 16 reviews? What? But I still had to go to work. I wish I could have reviewed those things right then and there. But hey, the Geekerwan test came out in the meantime, so yeah, I guess it all panned out well.
iPhone, they've had to take stuff out of it to get it down to this price.
We have to take Bikini Bottom and push it somewhere else. That's how Apple
stuff they've
treated
taken
Max Dave here.
Not that big of a deal. Some of the stuff they've taken out
Is
kind of harder to swallow. So here's one. The headline is that it gets the newest silicon straight from the flagship iPhone 16, the A18 chip. Great. Asterisk, this is not exactly the same silicon. This chip has one less GPU core.
yeah.
Pretty classic binning. Not that big of a deal.
True.
This happens all the time. We just saw the Oppo Find N5.
True.
That also has a binned Snapdragon 8 Elite with it.
It's kind of sad that we have to hear this very nuanced shit from Marquez rather than Geekerwan, who specializes on that nerdy
Only
stuff.
7 cores instead of the typical 8. It's barely a footnote, honestly. You'll only really maybe notice it with intense gaming, with the few games that are actually that taxing on the GPU. But aside from that, it's really good. This formula has worked in the past, and it's always ended up being, on paper, one of the most powerful phones in its price bracket, and that's still true. It still is.
Okay.
So a bin CPU...
Okay, so that's a much, much better summarization of using the A18, even with one fewer GPU cores, on a $600 product than Geekerwan provided. Again, and I know that Chinese prices are different, but like when we are talking to the Western audience, which this phone is primarily designed for, this is a no-brainer.
GPU, fine cut. Another cut, colors.
I disagree with that one, and I don't mean Marquez. I disagree with Apple. I think each iPhone deserves a color, and like a special color. I think Product Red obviously is kind of the most iconic. Let's say you wanted to move beyond that. You do some kind of cool blue, like obviously we have aquamarine defining the iPhone 16. On the 16 Pro, we don't have one clear winner, but both on the 15 Pro and the 16 Pro, like natural titanium just stands out as this like, you want like a super clean look that's like, it looks like the actual metal, right? To me, on the 15 Pro specifically, titanium blue was the color that most appealed to me. Before that, obviously, like you had like green iPhones and purple iPhones, and I do believe that the SE deserved at least one extra color.
There's no colors.
Well,
There's
I
only,
mean, black and white are technically not colors; they're contrasts.
Matte black or matte white. This whole design here really is actually, it's super clean and also super boring. There's a complete lack of text anywhere on the back.
That's super clean.
Honestly, the relatively small camera bump is a bit refreshing, honestly.
Yeah, I've heard that from a lot of people actually.
But yeah, if you want any type of color on this phone, you'll need a case or a skin to get that. It's funny, the last two iPhone SEs I reviewed were both bright red, which I thought was fun. And now there's actually...
I mean, yeah, but that's the one you reviewed. Actually, in the real world, I've seen some people use SEs. They never go for those bright colors. So I assume that that's probably why Apple removed it. I mean, you could argue if they kept product red, some part of the profits would have gone to product red, but that's a really small part of the equation.
No more product red products anywhere in Apple's
Yeah,
lineups.
a few
That was
cases
that
here and there
program that
left.
was the red colored products where the proceeds would go to help support AIDS programs. I kind of wonder what happened to that. So colors, that's another color.
Well, during the pandemic, Apple actually tried to use some of those funds more for like COVID stuff, but then like down the road, like COVID didn't fully end, but like the public perceives it as having ended. And now the question with HIV/AIDS is like, how much research do you want to invest in it versus other diseases? Would you be better off as like a company is doing like the occasional donation to like cancer research rather than having dedicated products that are specifically one color and are associated with this? I'm not sure.
Okay. No MagSafe in a 16E.
The MagSafe part is what I don't like, even though it gives us larger batteries. Specifically because there are things in here that are objectively taken from like premium iPhones in a way, right? Like IP68. Apple could have easily gotten away with making this IP67, the previous iPhone SE was, and said like, oh, super premium durability and water resistance, that's for the more expensive iPhones, right? In that way, those cuts together with MagSafe, it's like, oh, we removed a little bit of glue, we removed a little bit of magnets there, but removing one of those things is like, oh, so were the magnets that expensive or were they taking up that much space? As I said in the beginning of the video, you couldn't have made this device like 8.2 millimeters thick and just like used a slightly thicker outer glass.
That one feels a little worse. So obviously the last SE also didn't have MagSafe, but that was 3 years ago. And MagSafe has...
Jan, you're hoping for an orange or pink iPhone 17 Air? I mean, I guess it's not impossible, right? Like the colors on the 16s were pretty vibrant, so as long as you get the color that you want. I mean, there is a pink iPhone 16. I'm not saying you should buy that one, but would that be largely in line with what you want?
Now become a staple of the iPhone experience. At least I thought. And this is
but the problem is not to everyone. I don't think there's anything that truly becomes a staple for absolutely everyone. And we actually do have like an Apple interview, and I guess I'm not gonna cover too many like big news parts here. I mean, we've already covered like the battery capacity, right, of the iPhone 16e. I always want to say SE4. We've already given you plenty of summaries of data from 16e reviews, and then we have Apple actually going out and talking about stuff like the MagSafe removal. And some people are obviously pointing out, oh, I miss MagSafe, even though of course you wouldn't miss it because you wouldn't buy a phone that doesn't have it as a user of a regular iPhone or a Pro iPhone. But Apple's answer basically is here, most people in the iPhone 16e's target audience exclusively charge their phones by plugging them into a charging cable. They tend not to use inductive charging at all. Now, this doesn't ignore that obviously the MagSafe ecosystem is broader than just charging. Like there are MagSafe wallets, there is that camera puck that you use it to connect it, what I do right now for continuity camera, to your laptop. But you get obviously the option to get third-party cases that have MagSafe, and this is honestly where, to me, like even beyond just removing the magnets, the thing that really bothers me the most is that Apple didn't bother to provide a first-party case of any kind that actually like gives us some form of G2 official support. That is just weird. That's what a lot of Android competition is doing now. Granted, for them, G2 is something they focus on for like $1,000 products. So I kind of understand why Apple is like, oh, for them $1,000 is like for us $1,400, right? So our $600 product is more like one of their $400 products. So if there is no demand for like MagSafe in that price category, we're just not gonna include it. We're gonna save a couple of dollars, and we're gonna, or even a couple of cents, and we're just gonna push people to the more expensive iPhone 16.
The cheapest version of a modern iPhone. But no, this phone has just slow first-gen Qi wireless charging that maxes out at 7.5 watts. And since there's no magnets to make sure you get alignment right, if you're just a little bit off, it can be painfully slow.
Which, by the way, this is one thing that I would love to have seen covered more about Android flagships, right? In the last couple of years, before they now get like G2 cases. It's like, this is legit a cheap experience, right? Using wireless charging on those products. And some might say, well, they might have dedicated chargers where it fits like exactly one model. And I'm like, what? And then you have models that have this ridiculous large camera bumps that don't even fit too nice on a like big wireless charger. And I'm like, really? Over the years, you just wouldn't bother mentioning just how much better the MagSafe part of the Apple ecosystem experience is? And now you're mentioning, now that you're losing it on an iPhone, but when you were not getting it on $1,013 $100 Android devices, that wasn't worth mentioning it to you?
This week I had it on my desk charger for like half an hour, and it gained 0% while just getting warmer. I don't have to remind you of the downsides of early wireless charging. Of course, if you really, really want MagSafe on your 16E, there's nothing stopping you from getting a case. So I've got one from channel sponsor D-Brand here.
Okay, so everyone is using D-Brand here. That's funny.
Grip case, and it's got 16E with their easy to install. I feel like it's super disappointing to not have them in a new $600 iPhone. But now we got to talk about that camera. So there's a new single camera on the back. So
we still don't have the exact specifications. Some people speculate it's a 1 by 2.55 inch sensor, the same one that Apple uses in the ultra-wide. It's an f1.6 aperture, so that's actually wider than what Apple uses on the Pro models, but the same as what they're using on the 16 and 16 Plus. It loses obviously all the features of a dual camera system, including macro mode from the ultra-wide, the ability to record spatial videos and stuff like that, action mode, and it does not have, for example, the newer photographic styles, even though it does have Smart HDR5.
I actually think the whole good, better, best thing with the iPhones, where like the cheap one has one camera, the middle one has two cameras, and then the best one has three cameras, it actually feels pretty natural and like an easy to understand hierarchy. But please understand that this single camera is also not the same as the primary camera on the iPhone 16. It's 48 megapixels, just like the 16 and 16 Pro, but that's only part of the story. It is actually a much smaller sensor with inferior stabilization.
So the inferior stabilization is definitely confirmed by Apple. The much smaller sensor is not, though it is very likely to be smaller.
That manifests itself into just a very different look for photos. It kind of reminds me a lot, actually, of the A-series Pixel phones. It's not necessarily a worse look during daytime anyway. It's just different. Way less shallow depth of field.
That, honestly, over the Pro iPhones would actually be good to me, but I think that we have gotten to a point where, and this is my complaint with 1-inch cameras, there's a reason why 1-inch cameras always show you like huge landscape, and by 1-inch I mean 1-inch main camera sensor phones. Like they show you huge landscapes very far away, right? The focal distance that you get, not the focal length, that's a different thing, but the focal distance that you get to objects without like getting like a crazy amount of background blur is just ridiculous, because it's not because, 1 inch is an unmanageable sensor size. Obviously, you can have significantly larger sensors on regular like DSLRs and mirrorless cameras, but they have far bigger optical systems. So while I might not agree with the use of a sensor as small as like 1 by 2.55 inches, honestly, if Apple went like a little bit of the middle route and gave us like a 1 by 2 inch sensor, something that still performs a little better in low light than this, gives you a little bit more natural bokeh depth of field, but does not suffer from all the focal distance issues of sensors. For example, the iPhone 16 is a 1 by 1.56 inch sensor. The iPhone 16 Pro is a 1 by 1.28 inch sensor. So ever creeping up on that 1 inch or beyond. It's honestly, I get it. I get some of the benefits here. But yeah, this will be way less sharp, especially in like medium to low light conditions.
Natural bokeh. There's still plenty of sharpness and typical iPhone colors and saturation, but
honestly, I'm not sure. Maybe it's the same sensor. It would be shocking if it is, but it's just made worse by the lack of sensor shift image stabilization. We've seen very different results for like zoom cameras where Apple sensor shift OIS is so much better on their 5x telephoto that they beat sometimes sensors that like are like 30-40% larger. Yeah, but these are not bad results. Granted, they're in good light.
Then the image definitely gets much more quickly soft as the light starts to go away because the tiny sensor is just not getting as much light.
Now, it should also be noted, of course, it will not suffer the exact same issues as the ultra wide would do, even if it is the same sensor as the 48 megapixel ultra wide of the 16 Pro, because that is connected to an f2.2 aperture, while this is connected to an f1.6 aperture, letting a lot more light in.
It gets less likely to freeze action and more likely to kick in night mode. Also, missing the second lens means you're missing cinematic mode, spatial video, and macros.
And action mode.
So I just think, in general, if you're the type of person that cares a lot about the camera on your phone, you can see the clear, steady progression of better iPhone equals better camera. But this one, honestly, for its price range, is fine. Now, there's a couple other smaller things that the iPhone 16e also doesn't have.
Doesn't have Wi-Fi 7. It uses a pretty old Wi-Fi 6 modem. Doesn't have faster USB-C, but that's also Pro exclusive, not on the regular one. It doesn't have a dynamic island design. There are plenty of cuts.
Wi-Fi 6E and Wi-Fi 7 support is one of them.
True. Did not pre-watch, just know all the specs out of the top of my head.
Not a huge deal to me. It wouldn't be.
Neither to me, by the way. I also don't think, by the way, you buy like devices in this price range, and I know some people will say, well, $600 is not cheap. I mean, it is in the Apple ecosystem, I'm sorry. Like, you don't buy these devices for future-proofing. You buy them to work nice with what you have right now. Like, I myself, I have an iPhone 15 Pro Max. Sure, both my iPad and my Mac are Wi-Fi 6 because they're from 2021 respectively, but I have a Wi-Fi 6 router, zero plans to upgrade to either Wi-Fi 6E or Wi-Fi 7 while I'm still living in this apartment, maybe if I was living in a larger home. But my top internet speeds is like 250 megabits per second, so I don't need more.
Be nice for future proof.
And even right now, like I'm just connecting my my Mac via Ethernet, and I do have unlimited 5G. So my iPad right now is on 5G. So again, I'm not saying that this is representative of everyone. Obviously, some people would benefit from 6E or Wi-Fi 7, but it's not really a big deal in this price range. Yeah, Jan, you're asking what am I helped by Wi-Fi 7 if my router is from 2015? I have a nice router from like 2022 or something like that. I bought it relatively recently, but I bought it for like half the price it launched at, or something like that. And I have a Wi-Fi repeater in my bedroom, so I don't instead of buying like a completely overkill 400 euro, 500 euro Wi-Fi 7 router that still doesn't give me full strength in my bedroom, I'll just get an $80 Wi-Fi repeater, combine it with a $120 router, spend half the money, more than max out my top download speeds, and as long as, especially as I live alone, I do date, but I live alone. Like there's no point in me just building up for like an ecosystem of 30 multi-connected products.
Other phones do have it, but a lot of people will never notice because
True.
they also will never update their router. There's also no ultra-wideband.
Or even if they update the router, right? I mean, technically, I know Wi-Fi 6E, Wi-Fi 7, they have other benefits than peak download speeds. But technically, you will also most likely just be limited by the speeds that your carrier, that your network provider gives you.
Cannot do the precision finding with any AirTag.
Yep, that's also weird. This is MagSafe and UWB are my two issues. Honestly, Wi-Fi 7, Wi-Fi 6E, don't care too much about it. Like notch design, I still think most people don't really care between notch and dynamic island. Like dynamic island looks nice, but once you're really not looking at pro models where you also get like these like 1 millimeter thin bezels, I think you're fine with this kind of notch. But top brightness, I mean, yeah, it's not the highest, but it's still better than the previous iPhone SE. So yeah, but like MagSafe and UWB are like where Apple like really removed stuff, right? UWB sits on a separate chip, and MagSafe are like a ring of magnets. And Apple was like, oh, we can really take them out, save a little bit of money, and make people like consider the more expensive models.
Or anything like that. There also is the action button, but there is no camera control on this phone. But honestly, I don't think anyone's dying for that.
I am. Like, I hate this argument so much. After testing out the camera control button on the 16th generation, I feel like it gets such a bad rap for not being, like, in the perfect placement, or, I don't know, like, 3 millimeters, like, high, like, it's like a traditional camera shutter on, like, a big DSLR. Yes, it's a freaking smartphone. Of course it's not gonna be perfect. Nothing is ergonomically perfect on like a boxy, like palm-sized device. So I'm just confused. Of course I want my action button to be freed for something else, like visual intelligence. Well, technically I do get visual intelligence on camera control. But even right now, like for example, I have to choose right now because I don't have camera control. Now, granted, I don't have visual intelligence yet because the iOS 18.4 beta does not yet have it on the 15 Pro. But I have my action button set to camera. If I had camera control, that's just for cameras, I would set it to visual intelligence. But if I get camera control, and camera control, of course, supports both cameras and visual intelligence, now I have my action button free for something entirely different. Like I could use it for a completely different AI assistant or something like that.
But the sneaky X factor with this phone is they've actually introduced a new part.
True.
And that's Apple's first in-house designed cellular modem called C1. So there were some rumors about this. I remember from years back, Apple spent literally $1 billion acquiring part of Intel's modem
Which,
business.
by the way, relatively cheap, I would argue. Like, not saying that obviously Apple had to invest a lot of money following that, but usually I would have expected to be like maybe double the price, and also include like part of it be like compensation for like workers that you hired. So you can, for example, you can end up buying a company, but all the workers left because you don't have like an agreement with them. So usually what you would usually do is like you will pay like let's say $1 billion for the company, but you will set up like 100-200 million just for extra worker compensation, just to motivate them to sign up like potentially multi-year deals going forward and something like that. Obviously you still have to pay them regular wages afterwards, and that's an expensive process if you hire like 1,000 engineers. But yeah, it's interesting that 1 billion, honestly, for something that Apple might turn into a huge money saver down the line, and even potentially a point of differentiation where it's legit more efficient or more stable than the Qualcomm chip. Yeah, I could see that like being like, oh, 1 billion? That's dirt cheap.
So fast forward 6 years, and this is the first iPhone that doesn't have a Qualcomm modem in it. Apple's
Since then, yeah, because since then we switched to 5G, and obviously all 5G iPhones since then have been based on Qualcomm.
replaced it with their own for 4G, 5G, GPS, and satellite.
Yeah, that's also very important to note. Apple is not foregoing any. I'm not sure if glossness is included here, but like the fact that it has all like satellite connectivity, which yes, this is a feature that if they removed it because maybe C1 was not good enough, I would legit say don't even consider this phone, because it's a huge, crucial safety feature. You might never need it. In fact, hopefully you never need it. But it's better to have it and not need it than need it and not have it. So, but it's cool that they were able to implement all that stuff that they've been working with Qualcomm on over the years. Right away in C1. And yes, millimeter wave is gone, but they already had 5G iPhones without millimeter wave. It was called the iPhone SE3.
Now, they've had a lot of success with the vertical integration thing lately. We just saw this with, Apple Silicon replacing all the Intel chips that used to be in MacBooks. So I think the question people are wondering is this the Apple Silicon of modems? And I think the short answer is you probably won't really notice anything. But
that's also kind of what you would want in general from like a vertical integration thing, right? Yes, you noticed Apple Silicon on Macs because Apple Silicon on Macs was like coming in after years of Intel stagnation. Apple wasn't even using the latest Intel chips by that point. Dedicated GPUs versus like inbuilt GPUs were a huge problem back in the day. iGPUs were super slow. Dedicated GPUs were really hard to cool for the kind of thin and light products Apple was trying to build. But once you went to Apple Silicon, yeah, of course you felt the efficiency increase, the single core increase, the massive improvement to GPU performance, the including even of the neural engine. But what you didn't notice was like a completely different way of having to interact with your product, right? It didn't come with the complete downside of not having any backwards compatibility with previous apps. It had Rosetta, right, for it. It did not come with a Mac OS that was like basically an iPad OS. You still got full Mac OS with all the customization options. Yes, you lost something like Boot Camp, but that's more on Microsoft than it is on Apple, arguably, right? So, and the same thing with the C1 modem. Yes, technically you might lose something like millimeter wave if you were coming from an iPhone that previously had it. But for everything else, your connection strength will not require you to hold your phone differently. The efficiency might actually give you more freedom to charge your device differently, but it's not like double the battery life. It's not an Apple Silicon moment, or as like we saw for like the M1 MacBook Air. But I'm just saying that part of not feeling it is actually good. The fact that a company can actually save money in building something and optimize it even better because it's their own tech, and you don't feel a downside is cool.
That's actually a good thing. Like,
yep.
I did speed tests in different places.
Okay, that comes from not pre-watching.
Gripping the phone differently in different ways also doesn't seem to matter at all, because as far as I can tell, the antennas aren't really changed. There is no millimeter wave 5G support with this modem yet. That's something.
Well, with this modem, there will never be, but yeah, maybe with the next gen.
And though, again, a lot of people will also never notice
well,
that.
I mean, technically, yeah, I guess for top speeds, it's probably limited anyway. But I guess you could use the C1, but like a very different transceiver. But yeah, you wouldn't want that. Like you would want a separate baseband modem when you eventually also integrate a transceiver that can handle millimeter wave. If you even want to do that.
Can be or have been really big power draws in phones. Like you've probably noticed this. If you're in an area with like kind of crappy cellular signal and your phone is like hunting and switching back and forth between 4G and 5G, that can drain your battery a lot. And the main claimed improvement of the C1 really is actually efficiency, which I love to hear. It's funny, SE iPhones of the past have always also been small because they're using older bodies. So small body.
And I mean, 6.1 inch, unfortunately, in this landscape is kind of small. The iPhone SE3 stands out because at that point, well, it's interesting because the iPhone... The original iPhone SE was 4 inches at the time when the regular iPhone became 4.7 inches and the iPhone Plus became 5.5 inches, right? So yes, it was like 2 steps smaller. And 6.1 inches, it depends a little bit where you make the differentiation, right? Technically, Apple used to make 6.5 inch devices. Then they made 6.7 inch devices. Now they make 6.9 inch devices. So while yes, 6.1 inches is not as big of a difference as 4 inches was versus 5.5 inches, or as even as 4.7 inches was versus 6.5 inches, but it's still a noticeable downsizing, I would argue.
Modern processor that draws a lot of power, so battery life was just not a strong suit of
In fact, it was super weak. That's why I don't get why you even were recommending it, at least after like the launch year.
those phones. But this 16E is a modern-sized big phone, and then it has this new, more efficient modem that is actually physically smaller and makes room for a physically larger battery.
I don't think it's the modem that makes the size difference. I think the size difference primarily comes from removing all the small like stuff that really wasn't like, it has like a worse ceramic shield, but glass. It doesn't have the MagSafe rings. Probably has also a smaller, cheaper wireless charging coil overall, right? If it's not designed to handle 15 or even 25 watts, you don't need the copper to be as thick. So yeah, there probably are plenty of things that contribute to it having a larger physical battery over the C1 being physically smaller.
Battery life on this phone's been really good in my week of using it. Literally on par with my 16 Pro. It wireless charges way slower,
Yeah,
but
true.
it's really good battery. So 2 main thoughts here on the C1. One, if Apple's been working on this for years, it actually makes sense that they would debut it in a relatively low stakes.
Yeah, low stakes, low expectation product. I think Marquez is nailing this review. I think all his points have been fair.
Lower volume phone like the 16E, iron out any peaks.
I would still debate him on the point of like recommending DSE to like kids and grandmas versus not recommending the 16E to anyone. But then again, also like what Apple would like, it's not like he's recommending them to like switch to Android, which I was recommending to people who were like considering a $400 iPhone. Like he is recommending like a refurbished 15 Pro.
Figure out if there's any issues with it, and then when it's a big deal in the iPhone 17 series later this year, should be all set. But also 2, maybe this is like the other missing piece that will help enable Apple to make this like super thin iPhone Air everyone's talking about.
Yep.
Apple's always wanted to make super thin stuff, but battery life always suffers when you do that. So maybe this alongside that silicon carbide battery tech could enable them to make an iPhone that's...
Yeah, plus the 17 Air would use an LTPO screen rather than an LTPS screen. So while yes, higher refresh does consume a little bit more power in general, LTPO definitely helps compensate for that. And then when it comes to stuff like video watching and Apple's sometimes aggressive adaptive refresh rate, you actually get pretty good results where LTPO legitimately gives you better efficiency. Plus, if Apple maybe does not give the 17 Air too crazy of peak brightness levels, and if the Wi-Fi modem is more efficient too, combine that with the silicon carbide battery, combine it with something terrible like the potential removing of the stereo speaker, which I just hope doesn't happen, because that to me is a death nail to any product. Like, I know some people don't care too much about speakers, but like sometimes you do. Like, would you really want to remove it? Ugh.
Super thin.
But then again, that's just one rumor. Like, ignore it for now, Mark.
Battery doesn't suck. Maybe. We'll see. But overall, the iPhone 16e, the more I think about this phone, the more it feels like it exists specifically to push you up to an iPhone 16.
But then this is also, that's, I mean, it doesn't exist for that, but it exists in that context where, of course, it's part of the Apple pricing ladder. But it's not like Apple makes products that don't sell at all, right? They don't produce like 10 iPhone 16es after investing like millions of research and development into it just to like, we're gonna sell 10 of these, but hopefully that will push people to buy the regular 16. But yeah, if they're launching a new cheaper product, it's always partially designed to make the more expensive iPhone actually look better. That's also what like has been happening with premium brands in general. Nvidia versus AMD, for example, does not give you dramatically better value once they charge you lower. Sure, yes, the RTX 5080 is half the price of the 5090, but it gives you like 70% of the performance. Yes, technically that's better performance per dollar, but you get half the memory. And usually in the GPU space, whenever you cut something like the price in half, you never really got half of anything. You always got like 60 or 70%. And here you just get like literally half. And now people are like, well, if I'm buying a flagship product for super expensive money, might as well go with like at that point a refurbished or a discounted RTX 4090. At least that one has more memory, right? And this is similar here, where it's like, yeah, a refurbished or discounted older device might be better in some ways, but those refurbished older models, they cannot cover the millions of sales. They just don't attract the same attention as when a person just walks into the Apple store and sees all of those three like families of products next to each other: 16e, 16, 16 Pro, then the larger models Plus and Pro Max. It's just not the same.
In Apple's classic price ladder, you get enticed by this base price, but then the next rung on the ladder is only a small jump away, and
True.
it's sitting there with all of its shiny extras like MagSafe and an ultra-wide camera.
And a better main camera, and arguably the very nice like dual camera design and the extra colors like ultramarine and camera control and Wi-Fi 7 and ultra wideband and yada da da.
Here's the problem though. This phone fits the price ladder, sure, but it doesn't fit the price tag.
Yeah, and it will sell very well at $550.
Like, let's be real. Everything that's wrong with this phone is the price.
And that's very, very easy to adjust.
No, I'm sure. Tariffs.
Yeah, tariffs. Like some people say, why would tariffs impact, for one, the worldwide price of the iPhone 16e and not the pricing of the other models? Let's start with the latter. The point is that the more expensive iPhones are more important to Apple. Apple does not want to kill their sales, especially in the US, where like the strong dollar really makes a lot of money for them. And why is it worldwide price kind of adjusted? Because Apple right now does not want to have too much of a confrontation with the US government. Apple already announced like 500 billion of like investments in the United States. It's all gobbledygook, by the way. Most of that investments would have been happening anyway. And some of it is like really using like money that's really very tangential to Apple, but that's neither here nor there. So Apple does not want to like go to the US president and tell him like, oh, we want to be excluded from tariffs. Look, we just increased prices. And then Trump would get angry and scream like, what, you increase prices? I promised lower prices. That's not how tariffs works, because he doesn't know how tariffs works, right? How tariffs work. So Apple wants to avoid that confrontation until it might have to happen, right? If they can tell Trump, oh, we invest 500 billion in the US, please exclude us entirely from tariffs, and if that works, then good. Then they can more aggressively offer discounts through third-party retailers and carriers. They won't have to increase the price on their regular models or deal with much lower profit margins. So that's a lot smarter for them right now. But this could change in 3 months, for all we know.
The R&D of this new C1 chip, the extra RAM to support Apple Intelligence, inflation, maybe even, like all these
Yeah, those are all smart points.
things to
And I've already pointed that out, that next month some companies will start increasing prices in the US because of tariffs. They've waited thus far, they've sold out of inventory. Obviously there's never been pre-tariff inventory for the iPhone 16. But like companies like Acer, or was it Asus, right? They already said all our PCs are getting 10% more expensive.
some extent contribute to the higher price of this phone. Maybe Apple also plans on increasing the entire iPhone 17 lineup price too.
I could see that happening on the regular 17. I don't think the Air can afford to be more expensive than the Plus model used to be. Honestly, I think the Air should be a surprisingly cheap product, but that's an entirely different discussion. Quite honestly, I don't think I need an Air. I would have much more preferred an iPhone 16e Plus or something like that. If we already, like, if there was a product that could have justified a $600 price tag in that cheap category, in my opinion, it would have been like a 16e Plus, right? Like a 6 point. Let's not even say it would be like fully size competitive with the other iPhones. Let's not say it's 6.7 or 6.9 inches. Let's say it has 6.5 or 6.6 inches, like what the 17 Air is rumored to be. That to me would make way more sense than like a thinnest focused product.
But this is the same identity crisis that the Pixel A series just had. I don't know if you remember that, but
Yeah, but the Pixel A still sells okay by Pixel standards. Like down the road, discounted and refurbished older Pixels disappear, and I would argue that down the road, you like, let's say the Pixel 10a, right? That's gonna be built on a 3nm chip most likely. Like I would not recommend even the Pixel 9 Pro versus that Pixel 10a, just for the much better chip at that point.
budget phone came out, but the slightly older, more premium phone was still a better deal for most people because it was on a slight discount already. So you could get a refurbished iPhone 15 Pro for $600 today. I could argue that every single person considering the 16e should start by considering the 15 Pro. It's just everything about it is better. The screen
according to Geekerwan, you'll just get like 25% less battery life or 30% more on this one.
way brighter, more visible. It's a higher refresh rate. Triple cameras instead of one camera. Same battery life. It's only 1 year older. It's got Apple Intelligence. It's just, you should just start with that phone instead. And I actually feel like I know what Apple's answer would be if I asked them who should buy this phone. Because if you go to their site for the 16e, the built-in compare tool only shows comparisons versus iPhone 12 and 12 mini and iPhone 11 and the older SEs. So basically, if you're somebody with one of these older phones, then this would be a perfectly fine upgrade for you. You get that more modern design, the new chip, Apple Intelligence, and you're set. And they'd be right. It's not a bad phone for those people at all. It's just the new price does not match the phone.
Yeah, okay, so slight price adjustment would basically change its entire perception. I think at $500, people would say it's a killer deal. I think it's $550, people would say it's an okay deal. And I'm telling people, wait until it drops down to those prices, but consider that this is actually a decent product overall.
What? Who are you?
So that was a surprisingly good review by Marquez. I'm really happy. I might not agree with some of his recommendations based on it, but that's totally normal and fair. Like we don't have to agree on everything. Okay, so there's some more stuff, but I'll cover more like next week, because this is already a pretty long stream, 2.5 hours. I wanted to cover the Xiaomi 15 Ultra. Interesting spec point, one thing that I didn't consider before is that it would actually have a different battery life, different battery from its Chinese model to its international model. So it's 5400 milliamp hours in the global version, and it's 6000 milliamp hours in China. So no idea why that is happening. We also have news that the Oppo Find X8 Ultra is not even launching outside of China. So all of these Ultra models, I guess my last point about them is that they are very niche products. And this is why whenever I cover technology like silicon carbide, even to a lesser degree like 1-inch main sensors, the supply of these parts, it's not limited in a way. It's like those are not niche components, but they're way too low in supply. I guess 1-inch sensors could be fixed if Apple just came to Sony and said, oh, we want that. But there is a reason why some components can come out way faster on these kinds of niche products. Some of them not even launching globally, none of them hitting like the top 20, the top 10 in terms of like worldwide sales by smartphone models. So I'm just trying to like say, yes, there are some downsides to Apple by being as big as they are. They arguably could be implementing some technologies if they had a lot less sales, or like their consumers would be willing to wait months and months for certain supply to match. So I'm not saying this to downplay this. This is a cool product. It does have some questionable solution things, like, again, why does it have that weird 3x telephoto when you have like that great 4x telephoto? Why did you not make the ultra wide instead a little bit better? And again, with every 1-inch main sensor, I'm asking like, what's your focal distance and stuff like that. There's also questionable like advertisement points, like for brightness, like they're saying this screen has like 3200 nits of peak brightness. That will remain to be tested, but it's definitely not a bad product. And especially if you're in China, you get like pretty good money for it, like right. You get it for pretty low money relatively. I mean, like the 16 gigabyte, 1 terabyte model, once you translate it to dollars and euros, like around 1,000 to 1,100. The iPhone is like, the iPhone 16 Pro Max with a 1 terabyte is $1,600, right? And it's 1,900 euros. So now, granted, these prices are not gonna be the same prices as they are worldwide, I think. I'm not sure if these are just like off the cuff like translations of the price or actually official, but the way they said it, and it's expected to expand to global markets on Sunday. So I assume that the prices are not quite fixed for the international market. If it's actually just $1,000, that would 1,000 euros, that would be pretty dope. But I don't see it being like, what was the Xiaomi 14 Ultra price? Xiaomi 14 Ultra price Deutschland. Just gonna look it up for my market. Xiaomi 14 Ultra starting at 1,000. Now this is all after discount. 1,049, 1,159. So yeah, I doubt that it will start at less than around 1,200 euros. Yeah, 1,200. Yeah, so I assume that was around the MSRP. Yeah, but that's about it for most stuff here that I wanted to cover. Obviously, we've already talked a lot about the 17E potentially, what it could implement. Now, this is actually coming from Fixed Focus Digital. This is the same person who has alluded first to the iPhone 16e naming. So that's actually quite cool. So I'm pretty optimistic now about the launch of an eventual iPhone 17e. And when it comes to the iPhone 17 family, we get more and more confirmations, including the fact that the 17 Pro models will get 12 gigs of RAM, while most likely the regular 17 and 17 Air will stay on 8 gigs of RAM. 12 gigabytes of RAM will here be primarily for even better Apple Intelligence. We do not yet have rumors about stuff like, oh, is it like 10,700 mega transfers memory or something like that, but at least expect more memory. Also, we have more stuff about like a 24 megapixel front camera, 48 megapixel telephoto camera. We've covered all of these rumors in the past. There's nothing new here. Obviously, we've covered already that there would be an Apple designed Wi-Fi 7 chip across the entire iPhone 17 family. But again, nothing new. So whenever there's something new, or there's like a hard, big confirmation by somebody, Mark Gurman, on any of those specs, I'll go into more detail. But for now, this is just yet another analyst confirming stuff we kind of already knew. And that's quite cool. At least like 12 gigs of RAM on the iPhone 17 Pro will actually be a very interesting thing. Because when you look at like the base configurations of many current gen flagships, they're at 12 gigabytes. So unless you want to get like the 512 or 1 terabyte model, you're kind of stuck, quote unquote, with 12 gigabytes. Samsung does not even let you buy a 16 gigs of RAM Galaxy S25 Ultra. And while I'm sure that that will be rectified next year and 16 gigabytes might become the standard on like Snapdragon 8 Elite 2 products, that still will leave the iPhone with a lot of memory, because just for anybody who follows it, iOS is a lot more RAM efficient than Android. And plus, having 4 gigs of RAM extra, for example, if you run your camera and then afterwards you run like Apple Intelligence, you might run out of memory, right? So 4 gigs extra here, it's not like 50% more. It's just legitimately the difference between running out of memory or not. It's not just going to allow you to run bigger tasks. It's going to allow you to run bigger tasks and keep those tasks open for longer in the background. So that's pretty cool. If Apple deals well with performance, cooling, battery capacity, then I'm sure they'll be able to integrate 12 gigabytes of RAM pretty well into iOS. Checking if there's anything else we might have missed out on. Child account safety. Apple Watch lawsuit, Find My Network, blah, blah, blah. Yeah, nothing worth covering right now. If any of those issues blow up, I'll be covering them early next week. I'll be going away tomorrow. I know I've been going away pretty much a lot recently, but I've been having some fun on the weekends because I've been really stressed at work. So thank you so much, guys, for tuning in. I know this video came out at an irregular time. I know reacting to Geekerwan is always a struggle because of the subtitles and things like that. But thank you anyway for joining. Thank you again to Max Maximus for the generous super chat. As always, do all the YouTube jazz, subscribing, liking, sharing, commenting, and you can become a channel member here on YouTube. You can become a supporter over on Patreon. Whenever you catch me live, you can leave a super chat or a super sticker. And as always, let me know what you would like to see me cover next. Thank you so much. See you soon. This is Mark Tech, tuning out.